And we are now recording. Madam Chair?
All right, thank you, Kathy. As I say, let me go ahead and gavel in this session of the Oregon Aviation Board. And before we start, I would like to announce that we have a new approved member recommended by the governor and approved by the state Senate. So if you'll allow me, I'd like to give Ted 30 seconds or so just to introduce himself so everybody can get to see his face. So over to you, Tom.
Hey, Tom Kruger. I'm one of those very traditional aviation people who have been wrapped up in airplanes since I was 5 years old. And I'm not going to necessarily say where I am now, but I've been retired from United Airlines for 18 years. So there's some math that can be done there. Grew up in Portland. I worked at Flightcraft when I was 14 years old. And that was before we had age problems. But literally my whole life has been aviation. I graduated from Benson High School, majoring in aviation, worked at AeroAir out at the Hillsborough Airport for 7 years, went to United Airlines. 35 years with United Airlines, retired as a 747-400 captain. I have been flying corporate aircraft since 2002. And then 3 years ago, I finally said that was time for me to just back out and leave it to younger people to have a shot at the same kind of life I had. So my aviation interest right now is I'm building a Vans RV7. And I was fortunate enough to be recommended for this board, and here I am. So thank you for the time.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. And I understand your son is also a corporate pilot. Is that right?
I have my oldest son and second oldest sons are both corporate pilots based out of Denver. And I've got a grandson that has just got his commercial instrument multi-engine. He's in Denver right now, but he's hoping to get a position at AeroAir up in Hillsborough, which would be 3 generations out of AeroAir, because both of my sons did their time at AeroAir also.
Well, that is fantastic. Well, welcome aboard, and you bring us a tremendous asset when we to overlook Oregon's aviation system. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, let me go ahead and turn to the consent agenda. And the board's had a chance to look at the minutes from the February agenda, or the board meeting in February 4th. So if there's anybody that desires a change or a correction, please raise your hand or get my attention. Not hearing anything. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as it is?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Mark,
I'll second.
and we have a second by, is that John? Okay, a second by John. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as is, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, consent agenda has been approved. Okay.
Tom, don't forget to unmute your mic when voting.
Right. Got it now. Aye.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go to probably what's the most fun part of the whole board meeting, and that's the public comments. And for that, I would like to remind everybody to go ahead and silence any phones you have so as not to interrupt any of the public comment. And let me turn it over to Kathy, who I believe has got the batting order. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There was nobody who emailed in advance that they wanted to participate in public testimony. So I would invite any who are on the Zoom right now, starting with Mr. Benson, to go ahead and state your name and your city of residence for the record. And then you have 2 minutes to address the board.
Thank you, Kathy. Didn't realize there was a sign in for public, so appreciate you allowing me to do that. So Benny Benson with the Sisters Eagle Airport. I also realize that we're an agenda topic, item 11, but I thought I might address that initially. And if you want to ask me to hold until that, I'm okay with that too. Specifically, I wanted to respond and maybe follow on. I sent many of you the letter last night. I know that was late and hopefully it made it through to the system, but it's in response. Okay, good. Thanks, Kathy. in response to the core grant that we were awarded in 2019, I believe, or that cycle, we appreciate that. It's unique for an airport that can't receive FAA other types of funds. Those are important for us. I also understand the challenge you might have at the board and the Department of Aviation of something that's gone this long. So so I understand that, Pice. I only asked maybe for some consideration in the fact that the intent behind that grant, and I'm restating a little bit of what I wrote, was to put that together in 2020. I don't know that I would be out of line in saying 2020 was a kind of a challenging year, whether it's business, aviation, politics, what have you. That was a pretty large hangar project for the Sisters Eagle Airport. We had originally intended to work through conventional financing, and that was in place. But the banking industry was very protective of their portfolios that are full of restaurants and hotels, and therefore it made this one difficult. It further was exacerbated. Again, they had 2 PPP programs that really distracted banks. We went back out to the aviation community and have, at this point, secured the ability to do it privately. Basically fund the whole hangar project privately as was proposed originally and approved. I realize that it will take some time to finalize the agreements with the Department of Aviation, assuming you're allowed to leave that going. And thus I asked for the 3 months. If there's an additional 3 months of grace period to allow us to finalize that and put that into the construction season for 2021, that would be very much appreciated by the Sisters Eagle Airport. And so I'll keep that short. And if you have any questions or wanted to wait till agenda 11, depending on where you're at. And I just to say, I fully understand your position and I appreciate that. I just hope, and I think you do understand ours. This is a big deal for a smaller privately funded airport. So thank you.
You bet, Benny. Thank you very much. And for those who haven't had the chance to look at the agenda, right after lunch, we're scheduled a good 30 minutes, I believe, or so to talk about the grant provided to Sisters Eagle Airport. So if we could hold anything until then, that would be great so that we can get all the comments in at that particular point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Benny.
You bet.
Kathy, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there anybody else who would like to address the board during public comment at this time? Go ahead and use either the raise hand or try to get my attention if you're on screen. I have nobody. Oh, there we go. Bruce Bennett. If you would just state your name and your city of residence for the record, and then you have 2 minutes.
Good morning, Bruce Bennett. I live in Sherwood, Oregon. I'd like to have a minute talk about House Bill 2497 regarding the Aurora Airport. Just very summarily, the Aurora Airport has always worked very closely with our neighbors, Wilsonville to the north, Aurora to the south, and we want to continue and improve those communications. I think it's completely inappropriate for us to be guided or controlled by either of those 2 communities with having no aviation experience or management abilities for an airport specifically. And the Oregon Department of Aviation does a beautiful job, of course, and I just hate to see, especially annexation, completely inappropriate. But we have always and do always look forward to working with those communities. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate everything you do at keeping the communication flowing there at the airport. And appreciate you also being willing to be interviewed for that latest article in the Wilsonville Spokesman I saw.
My pleasure.
All right. So
Thank you, Madam Chair.
else?
And before we go to the next person, I want to note for the record that Vince Granado has joined us. So glad to have you here, Vince. I saw Ted Millar raise his hand.
Right.
If you just unmute, state your name and your city of residence for the record, please.
Yeah, my name's Ted Millar. I started the South End Corporate Air Park at the Aurora Airport. And of course, I worked closely with the ODA board and the surrounding communities, just like Bruce has talked about, for 25 or 30 years now. With the new board members that are now on, we've got a very active airport support group, in fact, 2 of them. And I'd really like to invite the ODA board to come to the Aurora Airport and just see what's going on. It's the largest airport in the ODA system. It's very well run, and we've got some exciting new things going on, and we're a huge economic driver for the community where because land is owned by private property owners, we pay over $1,350,000 a year in property taxes to the local communities for libraries, fire, schools, all those things. So if it'd be possible to either have a board meeting at Aurora, or if you'd like to come for a special tour of the airport, we have a huge hangar facility that has social distancing, and we could have a hybrid Zoom personal meeting if you'd be willing to do that.
Well, Ted, I think we are going to talk a little bit at the end about our upcoming board agenda. We are committed to other locations for the near future, but it's been 2 years since we've been out there. So it may not be right away, but we can definitely see about coming up here in the next 12 months or so, getting back out there. It's a very big piece of ODA's portfolio and for the Oregon aviation system overall. So we can definitely look towards getting back your way soon.
All right, is there anyone else who would like to address the board at this time? Going once, going twice. I see no raised hand and nobody's waving, to get my attention. Madam Chair, back to you.
All right, thanks. And I believe there was some mention of the legislation that we have upcoming. And so let me turn it over to Betty, who's got her director's update. And I believe the last few slides may have something to do with an update on what the legislature is. So Betty, over to you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, while Betty gets that going, I'd like to note for the record that board member Hilda Pareo has joined us. So we now have all board members present.
Okay, we should take a moment of silence to recognize this. It's been a while. Oh, give a hands up. Yeah.
There you go.
Right. So Betty, over to you.
All right. Okay. Okay. I'm just, if you'll give me a moment, let me get the screen share to work. Okay. Kathy, okay, do you see a screen that says Oregon Department of Aviation Director's Report?
No, ma'am.
Kathy,
Coming.
Kathy, can you hear me?
Yes, Hilda, I can hear you.
Okay, apparently I can't have video and audio at the same time, so I'm just going to turn off my video and keep my audio open.
what am I doing? I think I get it every time, and then I don't. Okay, where are we? There's Lindsay what? Okay. Okay,
So the one you want to share
it's screen
is,
2. Or do I want to share on screen 1?
no, you want the full. Where is, oh, okay, we'll go screen 2.
Okay,
Sure.
Okay,
There you are.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I apologize. Every time we do this, I think I understand how to do it, and then I invariably don't. So good morning. We have some really good news to share with you this morning. Since the last time we met 2 months ago, there's been a lot of activity at the federal level, and I want to start out by sharing with you some of the assistance that is coming out of the federal government, and then just do a quick financial snapshot and talk about our revenue forecast and the legislative update, and then lastly about what our office status is. So again, there's been a lot of activity the past couple of months at the federal level. About a year ago, the federal government provided assistance to us through something called the CARES Act, which provided assistance to airports across the country. And then in late December, there was an additional piece of federal legislation called the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or CRRSA. It was for $900 billion, $2 billion of which was set aside for airports. Oregon's airports got about 32 million of that. 31 million of that went to the 5 commercial service airports and $1 million to the general aviation airports. The state-owned general aviation airports will be getting about $205,000 out of that.
Press pause.
Pause?
Yep,
Why?
because this is the screen instead of that one. My bad.
Oh,
Okay, hang on.
Where? What?
So here, I clicked the wrong one. Which is, there it
Is
is.
that it?
Bingo.
Okay, thank you. All right, so you should see a picture with the Newport Airport on there. Okay, so again, out of CRRSA, the state-owned airports are going to get about a little over $200,000, which we will be using for operating expenses. Usually when we get FAA funding, it's restricted and it can only be used for capital projects. But for both the CARES Act this time last year, and then CRRSA and the American Rescue Plan, the funds are being allowed to be used for operating expenses, which is a help to us as we in backfilling or providing funding for the reduction in revenue from the state aviation fuel tax. So the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, was signed a couple of weeks ago. It's for 1.9 trillion. Out of that, 8 billion was set aside for airports. Oregon's airports are going to receive 95.5 million of that. About 92.5 million of that will again go to the 5 commercial service airports. 3 million of that to the general aviation airports. And then for the state-owned general aviation airports, we're expecting to get about 428,000. And also of significance in ARPA is, like the CARES Act last year, ARPA is providing matching share funds for AIP 21 grants. So any of the 56 airports that are eligible for federal funding in Oregon that get a grant in 21, there will not be a matching share. So that's a significant relief for the locally owned airports as well as for the state-owned airports. So in summary, CARES brought in 140 million for Oregon's airports, CRRSA another 32 million. ARPA is expected to bring in 95.5 million. So for cash assistance of about 267 million. CARES and ARPA also eliminated the local matching share on the AIP grants for 20 and for 21. Then the big news yesterday was the American Jobs Plan, which is President Biden's infrastructure proposal, was announced yesterday. It's a total of 2 trillion with 621 billion for transportation. And it has all the transportation modes in there, 115 billion for roads, 85 billion for transit, 80 billion for rail, 25 billion for airports, 20 billion for road safety, 17 billion for waterways, and 50 billion for resiliency. So there's not a lot of detail yet on the aviation portion of that, but what we know so far is that it will be administered through the FAA's Airport Improvement Program as a grant program. We don't know yet if there's going to be a matching share. We do know that earmarking, which is congressional directed spending for specific projects, will be returning, that each Congress member will be allowed a maximum of 10 earmarks each. So in Oregon, 2 senators and 5 representatives, so for a total of 70 potential earmarks. And again, an earmark is directed spending for a specific project within a state and within the Congress members' district. So we expect that the number of requests, both at the state and the local level, will exceed the ability to be able to fund. And so at the state level, the governor's office has asked that all state agencies that intend to ask for an earmark submit those proposals for the governor's approval next week. There are specific criteria for the projects depending on which committee in Congress is hearing it. For ours, some of those criteria are whether the environmental has been completed, is it shovel ready, is it AIP eligible? So there's several criteria that have to be met. And ODA has 2 projects that meet the criteria that we are planning to submit to the governor for her consideration. And those 2 projects are a pavement preservation project for $9 million, which would do crack fill and seal coating at 54 of the 56 eligible airports with a total of 73 runways. We currently have a small program where we do pavement preservation work for about $1 million a year. And if this proposal is successful, our plan is to take those funds and use them for the 41 airports that are not eligible for federal funding and do pavement preservation work at those airports. If we are required to do a matching share, our assumption would be it would be a 10% match, and we will ask the legislature to be allowed to use the existing uncommitted cash balance from the ROAR program. The second project that we are proposing is to install weather reporting equipment at the 13 remaining federally eligible airports that do not currently have weather reporting capability. And again, if a matching share is required, we would be asking to use the uncommitted cash balance out of the ROAR program. And the current uncommitted balance is standing right now at $3.5 million. So before I move on to the next slide, are there any board members with questions about the proposals or what I've presented so far?
Just one quick on the great weather reporting equipment initiative. Totally support that. Just made me think: do we have cameras at each one of our airports yet? I know we have them at some, excluding the smaller airports that are like at Santiam Lake.
Yeah, we do not have them at all of them, and that's something I would like to pursue in the future, to have cameras at all public use airports. There are a couple of other states that have recently partnered with the FAA to do that, to co-locate weather cameras at the weather reporting equipment. And that's something I would like for us to look at in the future, but not with this. We're just looking at getting the weather reporting equipment, and at a future date, we would look at looking for funding to put cameras on them.
Okay, super. Thanks, Betty.
Okay, any other board members with questions? I'm not seeing any, so okay, I'm gonna keep moving on.
Sorry, Betty, this is Vince.
Okay.
I can figure out my unmute there.
Hi, Vince.
I guess, how did you prioritize weather reporting? I get pavement preservation, right? That's a hard asset. What else did you consider besides weather reporting?
Okay, so we looked at the criteria that the committee has given, and that is basically, is it shovel ready, or can it be shovel ready within 12 months? Is it NIPIAS eligible? I forget, there's 3 or 4 other criteria. Of course, it has to be, AIP eligible. And so the other projects that I looked at, it had to do with resiliency, about putting more resiliency equipment at, excuse me, at the public use airports that don't have them, but we're on a pretty tight time frame. This has to go in, the request has to go in to the governor's office next week. And so these were the two projects that met the criteria that we could get the numbers pulled together quickly enough to do it. There are other needs out there, certainly, but pavement preservation is a priority for us. We're trying to keep what we've got. And this is an opportunity for us to catch up on the backlog of pavement preservation work that we simply don't have sufficient internal funds to be able to do to get everybody caught up, with the exception of Portland International and Portland Downtown Helipad would not be included in this. And we can have a offline discussion about why, if you'd like. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. No, that's helpful. I think it's just speed, shovel ready, and I get it. So now that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And we're expecting that there will also be local requests for also for the funds that are going to be available through AIP. And then the challenge for our Congress members is picking from all these worthwhile projects, which ones do they want to try to advance, because they're limited to 10 earmarks each. So we're hopeful that the governor will will find our proposal appealing, and will be supportive and allow this to move on to consideration by our members of Congress.
Betty, I have a question about your weather reporting equipment.
Sure. Hi, Hilda.
Hey, are you guys looking at AWOS, Automated Weather Observation, or are you looking at ASOS? Because ASOS is National Weather Service, but it doesn't provide NOTAMs. So yeah. Are they all going to be?
They could be either, or I'm aware that there's some new equipment that is AWOS equivalent that is out there. We haven't specified what yet. It's just some type of weather reporting at these 13 airports that do not currently have it. We haven't drilled down to that level of, is it going to be ASOS, AWOS, or something comparable.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Were there any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, then I'm going to move on to one last federal initiative that I wanted to bring to your attention. Is a few days ago, President Biden announced an offshore wind energy initiative with the goal of doubling the offshore wind energy production within the next 9 years. And that included $230 million from the US DOT for port infrastructure projects to assist with offshore wind generation, and a $3 billion debt capital from Department of Energy's loan program, as well as some R&D funding. And if you have ever been up the Columbia River Gorge area or along Oregon's coast, you know that Oregon is blessed with abundant, consistent wind resources. And so Oregon is a likely candidate for some of this offshore wind energy production. And there is currently, excuse me, the FAA recently asked for public comment on a proposed wind turbine assembly facility near North Bend. The specific proposal was for two 780-foot permanent cranes that will be assembling 1,000 to 1,200-foot turbines onshore at the assembly site, and then towing them out to their permanent location. And we believe that they're looking at a potential for 200 of these 1,000 to 1,200-foot wind turbines to be located offshore near North Bend. And the reason I bring this to your attention, not only because this is timely and because of the president's announcement, but the potential assembly site is located 4 miles south of the primary runway at the North Bend Airport. And so it's been brought to our attention recently that this is a potential new facility. And at our last board meeting a couple months ago, I showed you some pictures of some proposed wind turbines up in the Columbia River Gorge area near Wasco that At the proposed height of 656 feet, we're going to be the tallest structures in Oregon. If these two 780-foot cranes are approved and constructed, they will be the tallest structures in Oregon. And to give you a perspective, it'd be the equivalent of a 78-story building. So they're fairly large structures. And so again, Oregon is in a prime position to be able to capitalize on the offshore wind energy initiative. And I think we may see more interest in developing that potential, especially off our coast. So is there any questions from board members about this? I think we should have a board meeting down there when they're assembling or towing one out. I would like to see this.
Betty, Betty, this is Mark Peters, just a comment.
Sure.
That we're probably at least 5 years away. The permitting process for offshore wind is extensive.
Yeah.
And so it'll be probably quite a long time.
Okay. And do you think that will change with the president's goal to have it doubled within the next 9 years?
If they have to change the regulations in order to do that. So I mean, if they can, yes, but the regulations are pretty substantial for siting wind turbine systems, particularly offshore.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
And Betty, I have a question on the earlier slide. I apologize for being late on this. The question I have relates to the number of dollars going to a specific airport for the latest bill that was signed. Have you seen the list?
Are we talking about ARPA?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, we have the proposed list. The final list is not out yet because the bill was just signed a couple of weeks ago. But we have one of our Congress member staffers gave us a proposed list. So yes, so you see here on the slide, again, these are proposed amounts. They won't be finalized until, of course, the FAA releases them, but this was from one of our senator's office, so we think it's fairly accurate. So
Okay.
You see the 5 commercial service airports and the amounts that are proposed for them. And then for the GA airports, 3 of them are at 148, 8 are at 59, 24 at 32, and 22 at 10.
Okay, I was just curious. I just saw that and I thought, huh.
Yeah, if you would like to know a specific airport, we can talk afterwards and I can tell
Sure.
you what's proposed for that airport.
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
Any other board member questions on these? Okay. Okay, then I'm going to switch from the federal level and look at the state level. And again, good news. So as you know, our budget is, our operating budget is derived primarily from tax on aviation fuel sales. Our grant program is 100% funded by the tax on aviation fuel. And so the last year has been a little bit of a bumpy ride for us in that those fuel sales were impacted by the pandemic and fairly significantly. You can see in 2019, fuel sales in Oregon were about 213 million gallons. And then in 2020, it was about 131 and a half. And the spread between Jet A and avgas has remained fairly consistent at the 97% of fuel sold in Oregon is the Jet A fuel and 3% avgas. So this time last year, in May of 2020, was when Jet A really bottomed out. And that was the lowest it went, it was down 67% from the previous year. By January of this year, it's been slowly but steadily improving. And it was at 33% down, about a third down. For by next month, the forecast is that it will be down by about 27% and that we will be back to pre-pandemic levels by May a year from now. So our forecasting is done by Oregon Department of Transportation's chief financial analyst. And so this forecast is is from March, from a few weeks ago. So it's saying that we expect by May a year from now, we will be back to pre-pandemic levels at Jet A. Aviation gasoline, on the other hand, has always done better than what we thought. They bottomed out about the same time in April or May of last year. But by January, they had fully recovered and were actually doing better than January a year ago. For forecasting purposes, ODOT continues to show just a slight decrease for the remainder of this fiscal year and for all of our next budget year, or 2-year budget, excuse me, at 3% down. We know that avgas is going to do better than that, but for forecasting purposes, ODOT is still just saying it's just slightly below what it was pre-pandemic level. So,
Hey, Betty, may I ask?
sure.
What do we use these forecasts for? Because it worries me a little bit when we see we're up 45%, but ODOT still forecast a negative for avgas
Yeah.
in the out years. Are we using this forecast for anything significant? If
We do.
not, then I don't care about ODOT's
Okay.
forecast, but I question their numbers with what I see in January.
Okay, so the ODOT projections are for May of this year, going on through a couple years from now, is that it just be slightly below what it was pre-pandemic level. But if avgas were a more significant part of the total sales, it only accounts for 3% of the total sales in Oregon. So it's not a really significant dollar amount. If they were that far off on Jet A, then I'd say yes, absolutely, we need to revisit it. What we use the forecast for is when we're doing budget, both our CFO and legislative fiscal looks at that forecast in determining what our proposed budget is. So we used the forecast from, it was last fall when we were preparing our budget. And CFO used the November, I think it was November, forecast when they were preparing their recommendation for the governor's budget. LFO will use the most recent one when the legislature is looking at approving our legislatively approved budget here in a couple of months. So again, avgas is only 3% of the total fuel sales. And so whether we're 3% down or 45% above or 50% above, it doesn't affect the dollar amount hugely. And so we will ask ODOT, the forecasters to for the next one to revise it back up to what the actuals are looking at. But I don't think it's going to make a significant difference in the amount of total revenue that we're going to get off of the fuel sales. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. But I guess the forecast is not a huge driver of any particular action at this point. I mean, we made the budget back in November.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Now, let's share
I'm
you.
good.
Okay. If the fuel cells continue to do better than the projections, and I believe that they will, about a year from now, during next January's legislative session, we'll be going back to the legislature and asking to adjust back up, because our budget was based on the projections that were done last fall. And if we're beating those projections, I want to try to adjust our budget back to what it was, closer to what we had in the current budget, total amounts and total limitation, and to restore the positions that we've lost.
Okay, thanks, Betty.
Okay, sure. Are there any other board members with questions about this one? Okay, seeing none. So just Kristen's going to give you more detail in a little bit, but I just wanted to, just give you just a quick snapshot of where we're at. A year ago, as we were going into the storm, we developed a financial plan to get us through it. Now that we're hopefully seeing the end of the storm soon, I wanted to let you know the plan that we had worked We were able to maintain our cash balances above the minimum required. We're currently at our cash balance as of yesterday was at 807,000. We have 3 months remaining on the current budget cycle. We will be able to bring our budget, end this budget cycle within budget and within limitation. We got about a little over $1 million in help from federal funding. The legislature allowed us to transfer almost $1 million out of the reserves to backfill the lost revenues this year. We are asking in our next budget to be able to transfer another 700,000 if needed. Again, to backfill the reduction in fuel tax revenues. The budget for our next 21-23 budget cycle still has us taking a 13% cut to the budget and eliminating 3 staff positions. Those positions have already been eliminated. Again, if the revenues come back and are sustained at the levels we think they will, about a year from now, we will be going back to the legislature and asking to restore those positions. So if there's no questions, I'm going to move on to the legislative update. Okay, and I see I'm running a little bit over time, so I will try to go through this quickly. We're almost at the halfway point in the session. The target date for adjourning is June 18th. They're required constitutionally to adjourn no later than the 27th. So we're just about at the halfway point. There were about 4,000 bills that were introduced. And to give you a comparison to the last long session, there was about not quite 2,800 bills introduced. And it had a pass rate of about 43%. So this session, in spite of all the challenges, the physical challenges of the legislature, there was a record number of bills. So right now, the legislature is using kind of a hybrid for meeting. The committee meetings, where the majority of the work is done, is being done remotely, but the floor votes are being done on site. So there was a temporary disruption late last week, and then again on Monday due to 2 confirmed COVID cases, but floor sessions resumed again yesterday. There's been 1 pause for denial of quorum once already this session, but that was a 1-day denial. So they are back working again. Our bills were first heard in February, early February, for the sunset standalone and sunset package, and then the tall towers fee and our budget. Our budget was heard in March, but the other bills were heard in February. There's been no movement since then. They are stuck in committee. I've asked the co-chairs for a date to get them moving again, but have not gotten a response yet. And I'm starting to get a little concerned about them because we're at the halfway point, and the sunset bill, once it clears joint transportation, it then goes to another committee called the Revenue Committee for hearings before it can go to the floor. So that's where we're at on the legislation. We're trying to get the bills moved. But it's really at the pleasure of the co-chairs of joint transportation as to whether or not or when they are going to schedule work sessions on these bills. So are there questions? Yes.
To kind of sum up here, if we do not get a vote on our sunset bill, then we will come down to 1 final opportunity in next year's short session. Yes or no?
Correct.
Okay, so we still have 1 more shot after this, but man, they're taking us right down to the wire.
Actually, no, the fuel tax increase will sunset on January 1st. So we have 9 months until it sunsets. The legislature will convene in January or February of next year. So at that point, the fuel tax increase will have already sunsetted, and we will be going back for replacement legislation in the short session.
Okay.
We're out of runway here. We're out of time. We've got 9 months left, and it's got to get moved out of the committee. The co-chairs have got to agree to schedule a work session.
Is there anything we can do garner signatures, call people? Is there anything we can do, or any of our associated organizations that are our friends out there? Can they help us? Is there anything we can do?
The votes, I believe, are there once we get it to the floor. It's just the challenge getting it to the floor so that it can be voted on. And that means that the co-chairs have got to allow it to schedule a work session, get it voted out of committee, go to revenue, get it voted out of that committee, and then get to the floor. And it's got to get to the floor prior to adjournment or denial of quorum.
I understand that.
Okay.
Would it help at all for letters to be generated from the Oregon Aviation Board, from the Oregon's Pilots Association, from the Oregon Airports Managers Association? Can we write letters? Can we make phone calls, or would they make no difference at all? And I'm thinking about the letters directly to the chair.
I think it would help. The chairs are Senator Byer and Co-Chair McLean.
Can we get those, maybe a proposed letter, some language ginned up to each one of those organizations that I just mentioned, and just entertain the conversation with them on doing something, together?
Sure. Anything at this point, any pressure that we can put on the co-chairs would be helpful.
Okay. We'll stand by for that language then from ODA.
Okay. Okay. Any other board members have questions about the legislation, about this slide? And I know that the lobbyist for Obama has been working this closely as well and trying to get it moved also. Okay, lastly, and I apologize, I'm taking up way more time than I should have. I want to give you an office update. We're open, appointment only. We have a minimal staff on site. Most everyone is either working remotely or a hybrid of remote and on site. Per Department of Administrative Services, as of a couple of days ago, right now, the tentative reopening date is expected to be September 1st. And that is subject to the collective bargaining agreement, which is currently in negotiation for the upcoming budget period. We do not have any word on when the governor's executive orders related to in-person meetings is going to be rescinded. So we are planning for the June and August board meetings to be virtual. And if that changes, we will let you know. So I think that concludes my presentation. I apologize, I took way too long. Any questions from board members? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to who's next on the agenda. I think Heather's up next. Yes, Heather's up next. Okay, Heather, if you're on.
I am, thank you. Members of the board chair, as I try to share my screen. I am going to walk you through a couple of things with master planning. This came about because of a meeting a while back that we had in which I presented the Cottage Grove master plan for board approval. It had been some time since we only meet every other month. And there were some questions brought up in the process of master planning and when the board approves it and updates, and you kind of get the full flavor today, because not only do we have Master Planning 101, and I'm going to roll into the NEPA 101, which is also a part of master planning. We will also be, I'll be asking you to approve the Independent State Airport Master Plan. And then later on in the meeting, you'll get an update of our current project of the Joseph Master Plan. So that doesn't always happen like this, and you don't always get this barrage of master planning information, but it just worked out this way. Can you see what's on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. We'll get started. So what is a master plan? The master plan is a guiding document set forth and processed by the FAA. It's a federal document required for all of our National Plan of Integrated Airports in the system. So in order for us to receive, take, use federal funds, we are required to have a FAA master plan. We'll be going over the components, the guiding resources, the public involvement piece, the FAA involvement, and then our state agency coordination piece, which is also part of it. And then what a master plan is not, and the intended uses. So a master planning and local level planning. Master plans differentiate from federal, state, or regional wide planning efforts. And the master plans that we're talking about are a comprehensive study of that individual airport to determine short, medium, and long range development goals and to meet design standards as set forth by the FAA and future aviation demand, so that the airports can operate in a safe and sustainable and cost-effective manner, and to meet the grant assurances that airports are required to meet in order to continue to receive and use federal funding. All elements within the master plan they vary in complexity and level of detail depending upon the size, function of airports and the opportunities and the conditions of that airport. A master plan should effectively communicate the research process and justification from which all the final development plans are created and include all the stakeholders. You can see by this chart, it shows you how we go about working through the components of a master plan, what the inventory consists of, which is airside, landside, environmental, administrative, land use, all of those assets, hard and soft, forecasts for current, future based aircraft operations, and what's known as the critical aircraft, which is your design plan. You're planning for the critical aircraft, which is the one that has the most, the largest one with the most operations at your airport. Design standards, forecasted demand, and facility requirements, alternatives for the future, and then your ALP, which is an airport layout plan drawing set. And that is the component in which the FAA actually signs. The FAA does participate, but they'll only sign that piece. There are many master plan resources that we must abide by and follow, and those can be found in the FAA advisory circulars as noted here. And this is a part. So this slideshow, you can click on all of these and go to the advisory circular pages and read them if you so choose. There's a lot, and they are constantly updating them. Other guidance documents that we need to use are linked here as well in the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems and the terminal area forecast requirements. Additional resources that are used in all master plans are the Oregon Aviation Plan, which is also a statewide FAA funded guiding document of the aviation plan system in the state of Oregon. And it looks at Oregon as a system. And part of what's included in that document too is inventory of that system, the needs of those airports, and how those airports interact with each other. And that's used as a guiding principle for our state in some of the planning work that's done. Also industry publications by the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association nationally and National Business Aviation Association provide guiding documents for the planning process. Public involvement, the public involvement program is a twofold piece in our state. The FAA does require a public involvement program, and all master plans have a component of that that must meet their rigorous guidelines, and as well as our internal state agency coordination program, which is very similar. So the elements of the public involvement program should include a technical or advisory committee meetings, or both, depending on how depending on the type and size of your airport. A very small airport wouldn't have a technical advisory committee, but an airport like PDX may have many when they do theirs. Public information meetings would include open houses after or at a different date of the technical or public advisory committee meetings, small group and stakeholder meetings as needed. And they can be informal with stakeholders, elected officials, and civic organizations, and a public awareness campaign, which is mostly recent, but there is now some new guidance on what that can look like. Public involvement programs have had their greatest impact during the early stages, and obviously we would want to get out ahead of all of these, which we have. For instance, we're working on Joseph right now, and before we even got started, we made sure to get the word out early and meet with the stakeholders at the airport and the local community, so that they knew what was going on. And then throughout the process, the FAA involvement is a key piece of every master plan. And they have been doing a much better job since they're fully staffed now. And they do approve sections, like I was mentioning early on, but all chapters are sent to them for their review. They do put their signature only on the ALP piece. But there's stages, if you will, that you shouldn't move forward without at least getting a approval or an okay to move forward from the local airport district office. And that would be your forecasts and the selection of criteria of your critical aircraft, and then the final airport layout plan, which comes at the end. Those elements, the FAA has to be a part of those determinations and decisions, and especially because they have to do with the funding that you'll receive in the future. Coordination with the FAA obviously is essential to identify significant planning issues and determine the type and magnitude of the efforts required. Scopes are all set forth in master plans. Those scopes are all approved by the FAA and generally set by the FAA in your processes. So they are very involved. SAC agreements, which is an ODA requirement, and all state agency requirements. So a SAC agreement, the state agency coordination agreement or program, if you will, is a program that all state agencies have, and it's set forth similarly to what a local jurisdiction or municipality would do to assure that their land use programs are being carried out in compliance with with state planning measures and DLCD's requirements. So each state agency, ODOT, us, Parks and Rec, they all have state agency coordination agreements so that they can make sure to follow DLCD's guidance. And then all draft plans are distributed to all parties to identify the conflicts and the coordinations with local comp plans and transportation plans that they have. And then the ORSs are included on there for, excuse me, if you'd like to look them up later, because we do have to comply with them and we do regularly update them to make sure that we are in full compliance. So I wanted to go over a little bit about what a master plan is not. A A master plan is not a local jurisdiction plan. And remember, we're talking about a master plan for an airport, i.e. what we're going through right now with Joseph, and also what you'll be approving and what we finalized through Independence. Planning at a local level does not constitute a local jurisdiction plan. Master plans may, however, be incorporated into the local plans by reference or adoption by commissions or councils. For instance, an FAA master plan may and should be adopted into the local comprehensive plan, and that is a state and local document and process. A master plan is not a commitment to funding. No funding is committed based upon a master plan. It's just simply a tool to use to prioritize. For instance, there may be projects listed in your master plan, but that doesn't mean that the FAA is committing to those projects or is going to fund those projects. It could be a goalpost, and maybe at that snapshot in time, that is what the FAA agrees that looks like is going to be the development plan for your airport, but things change, development changes, and so does the activity at airports. A master plan is not a substitute for project design. Identified projects also undergo immense reviews and design processes before construction, and that includes all environmental reviews that are required, and then design and pre-design. And some of those environmental reviews will dictate the design, but the master plan will also tell the engineer, the project manager, what type of environmental will be required. So an outcome of a master plan is a level of detail of what maybe if a NEPA is required for a particular project that is upcoming. And then some projects may require additional justifications like air traffic control towers, runway extensions, even prior to environmental review. And Grants Pass is working on one similar with their runway extension right now. Intended uses of master plans, they are a living document and they're meant to inform decisions, and they should be updated approximately every 10 years or as needed, as events can warrant changes and updates to the master plan, and that would include demand, economy, community, local needs, etc. But we do need to provide justification for near-term projects. Justification for most projects are built into the master plans, but they can dictate the purpose and need, and they shall dictate the purpose and need that's required for the environmental review, as I was stating earlier. Master plans that is a deliverable of a master plan. You can't have, they will set forth your purpose and need to allow you to undergo the next step of your environmental, and that's dictated by the National Environmental Policy. Of the 12 NPIAs or National Plan of Integrated Airports state-owned that are eligible for federal funds, 10 of them have either had a master plan completed in the last 2 years or have one planned in the next 4 years. Bandon, Cottage Grove, Lebanon, Malino, they've all had master plan updates in the last 2 years. This year, the board will approve Independence master plan. And in 2022, when we're completed with the Joseph master plan, it will be brought before the board and approved. That will be followed by Condon in 2023, and Chiloquin in 2024, and Siletz Bay in 2026. The 2 state-owned airports that are not scheduled for planning efforts in the next few years are McDermott and Wasco. McDermott is on deck, but needed to be put off, and mostly due because we just did massive capital improvements, and there is not a current need to look at that airport due to its low use as well. And then Wasco, because it's what's considered unclassified. And that means that the FAA will only fund projects at unclassified airports to the magnitude of a large capital improvement project, like a runway rehabilitation, if it's necessary. It no longer qualifies for the general entitlement of $150,000 a year. I'm sorry, I did not mean to go forward. Madras, Klamath Falls, Brookings, and Bend are currently in various stages of their master plans. Astoria, Baker City, Creswell, McMinnville, Ontario, Portland International, and the Dalles have master plans or master plan updates to be considered in the next 4 years on their capital improvement plan list. And I have one note, the Aurora State Airport Master Plan that was adopted by the board in 2011 and then discussed at a more recent board meeting is now 10 years old. I would say this update is also due, and the FAA is encouraging us to update this plan. And we are in discussions with the FAA currently. And I believe Betty had a letter that was put in your packet about that too. Are there any questions about master plans? Okay. You know, super exciting. Bear with me. Let me see. Now I need to switch out my.
And Heather, do you have a camera?
I do. I'm sorry. I'm working from home today, and I'm not used to my setup right now, but
Hey, there we go.
hi.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you guys too. Let me see.
Oh, and then Heather, just as we get ready for the Independence State Airport, is your presentation going to address Hoffman Road relocation? I noticed it's in the airport. But I just wondered if we got the power to do that in the out years.
Um,
Isn't that a city-owned road?
for Independence,
Yeah.
yes, it is, and it won't address that to that level. That
Okay.
it is a more local jurisdiction piece that will be a part of. Before we go into the Independence Master Plan, I had touched on the environmental piece, which is really key, and one of the components and deliverables of a master plan, and it is your purpose and need, which comes out of a master plan, and the environmental analysis piece, which is huge for the work that we do in design and also in planning. And so when we say NEPA, it is all encompassing, and it's the National Environmental Policy Act, and we are applying it to airports per the FAA's guidance and the environmental impact categories, which would for airports are specifically categorical exclusions, a Cat X, an environmental assessment, which is a little bit bigger than a categorical exclusion. It generally means that you have disturbance in areas that have never been disturbed before, and an environmental impact statement, which is even larger. And
Heather,
then
did you want to share your screen?
Share screen.
Oh yeah, for sure. I thought I was doing that. I apologize. I'm trying to get there. Share screen. I had clicked on it. I guess it didn't go. Is it not sharing?
No, it's still on the Brady Bunch.
Oh. Well, that is so odd. Give me just a quick second. Get up there. Kathy, can you share the NEPA 101 for me?
Yes, I
I'm
can.
not sure why it's not allowing me.
Oh, something came up.
Huh.
Let me get that for you.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Okay, are
And
you?
that's going to force, thank you, Kathy. And that's going to force you to follow along with me, huh?
I was anyway.
Because you're going to have to advance my slides, right?
Not a problem.
Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay. Back to the NEPA information. The National Environmental Policy Act was signed into law in the 70s, and it requires federal agencies to assess environmental effects and proposed actions prior to making decisions. The range of actions covered by NEPA is broad, and it includes making decisions on permit applications, adopting federal land management actions, and constructing highways and other publicly owned facilities, which is where airports fall in. Under NEPA, agencies evaluate the environmental and related social and economic effects of their proposed actions, and agencies provide opportunities for public review and comment during those processes. Next slide. NEPA is an umbrella policy, and it contains all of those things under that umbrella, a lot. Water, air, historic preservation, occupational safety, health, executive orders, noise, coastal zone management, endangered species, and Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, all of which, except the marine piece, most generally are found on airports. Next slide. NEPA rulemaking hierarchy. If you're curious about all of those, I have listed these to you in the slide, and feel free to go back at any point in time and read at your leisure. It's everything that we've already currently talked about. Next slide. And applying NEPA to airports. The FAA Office of Airports is responsible for identifying major federal actions involving the nation's public use airports. When an airport sponsor like us proposes a major federal action, the airport's office is responsible for analyzing the environmental effects that that action had and its alternatives. The FAA ARP is the lead agency designated to supervise and the preparation of the environmental analysis and also review it and make sure that the federal, state, and tribal and local agencies having special expertise with respect to an environmental issue or jurisdiction by law may be a cooperating agency. The nexus for ARP NEPA review is receiving federal funds to a project, and it is a federal, and it must be started. It's a federal action, so it must be started by another federal agency. So the FAA must actually start the NEPA process for us. Next slide. Environmental impact categories. So human factors include noise, compatible land use, environmental justice, social, section 106, which is historic and cultural, section 4, recreational lands, wild and scenic rivers, farmland, light emissions, visual impacts, construction and coastal management, and then natural factors. That you'll see the whole list on the other side as well. Next slide. Types of environmental review. Since not every airport is the same, obviously, we talked about that earlier, size, types, or has the same environmental resources. The resources addressed in the analysis can vary and will generally be called out by your overarching master planning document. If a resource is not present near the area of potential effect, and a lot of people will say the APE, it is not addressed in the analysis. The FAA acknowledges all actions aren't likely to cause the same types or extent of environmental impacts and has identified the following levels of analysis. The categorical exclusion, which we went over earlier a little bit, the environmental assessment, and then the environmental impact statement. Most things on airport are CADXs, and that would just mean that it's already been disturbed. So when you are redoing a runway, if you will, most generally it's a categorical exclusion because all of that land has already been disturbed and already brought in additional material at some point in time, and you're just going over and rebuilding the same thing. It still needs to be reviewed, but that is generally what a CADX is. Next slide. Attached in this too are the environmental review pathways so that you can see how the review gets done, who does that, and what's required, if there's significance to it, how it goes through the process, and who's responsible for doing those. I'd encourage you to take a look, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to me at any time. Next slide. Categorical exclusions, we already went over. A CADX is not an exemption or a waiver of NEPA, but it's just a level of review. Next slide. A CADX that's simple and documented is one step up, and it just requires additional documentation and further guidance. So there is a little bit more work to it, as it shows in this graph. Next slide. CADX simple and documented, the schedule is 12 to 18 months. Generally, we haven't had any issues with anything going past 18 months, especially for simple and documented CADX. And design is typically requires anywhere from 5 to 30% project design throughout those components. And that can be some of the things that we're working on now that would include even obstructions and obstruction removals. Next slide. An environmental assessment is a little bit deeper, and this is prepared to determine whether a proposed action will cause significant effect on the human environment or a significant impact would exceed regulatory thresholds or limits. So there's a lot of process and preparation for a full EA. The FAA's orders and Chapter 6 provides guidance on that preparation, and the consultants guides the sponsor through all of those. The proposed action potential impacts, and then they're compared with any no action or reasonable alternatives. An EA would summarize the full environmental analysis, and then conclusions would be circulated to the public, and are always circulated to the public for their comments as well. And then the FAA will either approve the proposed action by issuing a finding of no significant impact, which people call FONSIs. And they may also include mitigation measures or further analysis, which would be an additional time frame and additional analysis and called an EIS. So that would generally probably take another 6 to 8 months on top of probably what's already maybe an 18-month process. Next slide. And then your environmental assessment, which then to initial process is usually about 24 months. They have taken longer, but there's been some recent executive orders that really have tried to keep these EAs to a 24-month period of time to try to get through that and to make sure that that does include 30% design of a project so that your stakeholders can see what the proposal is. And then due to the design requirements, it may require additional contracting with the engineer of record to utilize the subcontracts with your environmental consultants too. Next slide. And then finally, your environmental impact statements, which is an even much larger review process too. And that would just mean that there's further study that needs to be done in order to determine if a significant effect on human environment is going to be caused, or additional thresholds need to be reviewed and looked at, or if there's additional coordinating agencies, both state and federal, that need to be part of that. And again, that's another block of time. We could add another 6 to 8 months on top of the already 24 months. And then if the FAA approves the proposed action upon the completion of the EIS, they will issue a record of decision on top of that. Next slide. Environmental impact statements. The schedules do vary greatly, but as I was saying, it is a commitment by our federal partners to try to not let these processes exceed 3 years, because you really want to move forward with it or not. But everybody that is involved with that project needs to know if it's going to be able to move forward or not. So they do like to now start keeping more of a cap on it. Next slide. Purpose and need, and I've talked about this a couple of times. So the purpose and need statement is the linchpin to a successful environmental analysis, and it is a deliverable on planning studies and your master plan. Your purpose and need will establish the reason why a project is being proposed, and then it will clearly state the proposed action in a well-defined and concise statement, plainly written for non-aviation readers as well. And this will allow you to move forward with whatever that project is. The justification for a good purpose and need is born from solid planning and recent planning, and it is always backed up with strong, justifiable data and forecasts. Next slide. Environmental analysis takeaways. Build environmental analysis into all CIPs. It does often take longer than anticipated and cost more than you think it should, but it is key to good overall planning for your airport. Communication is always key. Airport sponsors need to work closely with their consultants in the FAA and an FAA environmental specialist. And remember, the FAA is always the lead agency for the NEPA. And your purpose and need, again, is the solid and justifiable statement that can never be underestimated, because it is the defining factor of that, of those projects or project. Next slide. And so one of the reasons why this came up is we were talking about it through the Cottage Grove master plan and why it was so important. And I just wanted you guys to know that this was a key factor in all master plans. And it just seems to get overlooked sometimes. And I just wanted you guys to have all of that information. So are there any questions?
Thanks, Heather. Let me put it out to the board members first. Any questions from any particular board member on the NEPA process going forward?
No, thank you. That was very thorough. Thanks for all the explanations.
Okay, hearing
Yeah,
that, I just want to say.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it, Heather, and having gone through these a few times. They're complicated, but they're really important. A lot of rules to it. You know, I always say about a master plan, it's really how how an airport won't develop is really what the plan turns out, right? But I think they're really important to go through it, and there's just so many rules and hoops to follow. We're fortunate to have the staff that understands the whole process. So.
And excellent consultants. For sure.
And I would echo, what Ben said, very important. And I think this is the next big thing going in. We got one coming up probably for Aurora once the FAA dollars fall for the projects out there. So it's just, no matter what airport, it's just an important thing to do. And that purpose and need statement, I agree with you 100%. Getting that thing rock solid, that is the key to success every time. So,
And you can't move forward without it. And that's kind of what I wanted to cement and make sure everybody understood that piece.
Yep.
If
Okay.
there's no questions, we can go right into independence if you'd like.
I think let's talk independence.
Okay. So Kathy, can you bring up independence too? Right, I'll have the same issue, unfortunately. The link was also included in the agenda, and we are looking for approval of the master plan and acceptance of the findings of compatibility and compliance for the Independence Master Plan.
You see the screen.
And the beautiful shot of Independence.
Great photograph.
Next slide.
Love that beach 18 on the left.
It's very beautiful. We just went over the purpose of the master plan. Again, chapters and components of the master plan, which was done at Independence, and all master plans include the introduction, the inventory of existing conditions, aeronautical activity forecast, facility requirements, airport development alternatives, recycling and solid waste management plan, airport layout plan and associated drawings, and a capital improvement plan and implementation plan. Every airport master plan has all of those components and public involvement, as well as this one did. And it was included to you all a couple of months ago for your reading. Next slide. Master plans obviously are intended to provide a 20-year outlook by identifying all of the existing facilities, forecasting for future activity, applying design standards, current design standards, and determining improvement facilities that will be required to meet those design standards and our forecasted needs. The last master plan update prior to this one was done in 1997, so obviously it really needed to be updated. And it provided us an opportunity for us to meet with the users and stakeholders and discuss their airport vision as well. Next slide. We kind of went over all of this already, but main components are of airport role and issues. National General Aviation, National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, state, local general aviation, and Oregon aviation plans were included, as well as local aviation facilities and businesses, aviation operations, and we determined by the Planning Advisory Committee, which was included in this master plan as well. Next slide. In this one, specifically issues were drainage, there's temporary flooding, and then based aircraft count. We wanted to make sure that the aircraft were counted accurately. We did see some opportunities in the West Side development area, which you noticed hopefully when you were reading the document, and then inclusion of the land within the urban growth boundary on the West Side development. continued commitment to residential through the fence. There was consideration for feasibility for the grass landing area, which was brought up by the PAC, and also an instrument approach procedure possibility of future procedure was also identified by the PAC. Next slide. Chapter 2. This chapter gathered the data to be used throughout the study and including the baseline for airside facilities, land use facilities, airport support facilities, FAA design, administration, and environmental inventory. And what you see on this slide is also a picture of the PCI, which is the Pavement Condition Index, and a general overview of the taxiway, runway, apron area, and connector taxi lanes. Next slide. The Chapter 3, Aeronautical Activity Forecasts. I'll just go over it real quick. You have the chart next to it. It showed 2017, 2022, 2027, and projected 2037. Based aircraft forecast a growth of 1.4% average. Operations at 1.75%. Predominantly single engine piston-based aircraft, and operations equaling 207 operations per based aircraft. Next slide. This is the design aircraft that was used in this study. By applying the design standards and comparing existing facilities against forecast, operations and based aircraft facility requirements were determined, and this was all included in the plan. Next slide. Chapter 5 goes over that, and that would start with your facility requirements, identification, landside and airside alternatives, preliminary screening, short list of alternatives, a no-build alternative, the planning advisory committee meeting number 4, and finally with the preferred development alternative selected by ODA with all of the input from the PAC. Next slide. The development alternatives used for evaluating were planning principles, operational consideration, fiscal factors, and environmental considerations. Next slide. All right, this is the beautiful picture of the preferred, one of the preferred development alternatives and the West Side development. I want to stop here and ask the board if they have any questions. I don't know when everybody had the opportunity to review this, if it was last month, because I think we were supposed to review this one earlier on, but I wanted to make sure that I provided you all ample opportunity, the board members, to ask any questions throughout my presentation. Okay. Capital improvement and implementation plans. The focus on the final chapter was estimating the cost proposed with the project, along with forecasting financial revenue and expenses to anticipate fundings. The CIP that was included also categorized a short, intermediate, and long-term project list and contained projects. Certain projects were demand-driven, obviously. Next slide. Unlike maintenance projects. Install fence and the construction that is actually ongoing, and we just did a bid for that and didn't get any bids in at this time. I was going to go over that a little bit later, but since we're talking about this, it is an ongoing project and we're going to have to rebid it, and hopefully we'll get some takers for that project because it is necessary. We do have some short pavement maintenance scheduled, and those are like carryovers, but we usually put $20,000 in those pavement maintenance pieces. Replace PAPIs at some point in time, some environmental assessments to be done for any reconstruction, extending runway, taxiway A project, and the aligned taxiway reconfiguration of the connectors and lining plan. That environmental assessment will be we'll have to do with the final project that's listed on the bottom for 1634. Next slide.
Yeah, Heather, I did want to, just real quick, what's driving the reconfigurations of the numerous cross taxiways, the connectors, excuse me?
Oh, FAA design guidance
Okay,
requirements. Yeah.
all right.
This is the capital improvement and implementation plans 2024 through 2028. That's a guide. And then the long-term projects, similarly, a guide. 5 planning advisory committee meetings were held along with 2 public open houses. They were all well attended. There was a lot of really good discussion. And it was a pretty great, robust planning process. As you probably read, the FAA approved the forecasts and the ALP drawing set. And that's why we're here for your approval.
Okay, out to the board members. Any questions? Let me start with Hilda.
None. My question was the movement of the taxiways, but you asked it.
Okay, super. Tom, any questions from your end?
No questions for me.
Awesome. Mark?
No, I think great presentation. Thank you.
Super. Doug?
No, go ahead.
All right. And then Vince? Or
No,
excuse me.
it all looked good to me.
Okay, and then John?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you. I did ask Heather, we talked a little bit offline, so no,
Okay.
she answered all my questions. So it's good.
All right, well, good. With that then, I guess if there's no questions, do you want us to go ahead and move to adopt, or do you want to wait to also talk about the acceptance part, the coordination part as well?
Yes, I would like to move to adopt and accept. I just didn't. I don't have that in front of me. Do you have a copy of that, Kathy?
I got it. I can request a motion if you're ready.
That would be great if you could. I'm sorry. It's hard with just one small screen.
I got you. So with that, if I could have a motion to approve the State Aviation Board to adopt the Independent State Airport Master Plan, the findings of compliance and the findings of compatibility, that would be great. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I would make that motion, Doug.
Okay, I have a motion by John and then a second by Doug. Is that correct?
That'll work.
Okay. With that then, all those who are in favor of the State Aviation Board adopting the Independent State Airport Master Plan, the findings of compliance and the findings of compatibility, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing that, the Independent State Airport Master Plan has been adopted along with the findings of compliance and the findings of compatibility. With that, that takes us into voting now to also approve the capital improvement project list. So with that, do I have a motion that the State Aviation Board approve the capital improvement projects list in the Independent State Airport Master Plan and the modification to that list by the FAA through the annual issuance of the 5-year CIP? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion by Vince. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Hilda. With that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. With that, the State Aviation Board approves the capital improvement projects list in the Independent State Airport Master Plan and the modifications in the list by the FAA through the annual issuance of the 5-year CIP plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions in the future, please feel free to reach out anytime.
Okay, super. So if I read my agenda correctly, we're going to get now to talk about taking in some federal money. So Kristen, let me put it over to you.
Okay, great. Yes, so I'm going to lead you through the vote for the CRISA funds. And real quick, before I did that, I wanted to introduce you to, we have a new LFO, so our Legislative Fiscal Office budget analyst. So he just started with us right in the middle of session. So he's learning our budget as he's trying to get us through session. So Ben, are you on the call right now? Okay, maybe not. So I'll maybe introduce you to him later on in my next presentation. So let me start sharing my screen here. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so can you see my screen now? Okay, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog just started barking, of course, as my presentation started. So we're gonna do the vote for the CRISA funds. So the reason we're doing this vote is because ORS 835.025, the board must authorize the accepting and expending of funds. So that since this wasn't already in our budget, we need an extra vote so we can use these funds. So the CRISA funds are the Coronavirus Response and Release Supplemental Appropriation Act. And so CRISA was signed into law on December 27th of 2020. And it includes nearly $2 billion to be awarded as economic relief to eligible US airports and eligible concessions at those airports to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. And so of the $2 billion, what applies to us is the 45 million that goes to non-primary commercial service and general aviation airports. And so the share is based on the airport categories. And so of that 45 million, 5 million of it is for airports that participate in the FAA contract tower program. And that's divided equally amongst those. So for us, that's just Aurora. And on the next slide, I'll show you our share of the funds. So you can see Aurora gets the most because they're the largest airport, and then they also have the control tower. So amongst the 11 NIPIAS airports that can receive federal funding, state-owned, the total is 205,162,000. So how the funds can be used. So according to the FAA, they can be used for costs relating to operations, personnel, cleaning, sanitation, janitorial services, and combating the spread of pathogens at the airport and debt service payments. And then the airport control tower funds are to cover the lawful expenses to support FAA contract tower operations. And so that leads us into the vote. Are there any questions before we take the vote? Okay.
All right, so hearing no questions, do I have a motion that the State Aviation Board approve acceptance of the $205,162 of the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act funds from the FAA for the use of operating expenses for agency and airports?
So moved.
I have a first motion by Mark. Do I have a second?
Second.
Who was the second?
Tom.
Oh, Tom.
Okay, we have a second by Tom.
Yes.
So with that, all those who approve, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing that, the board has voted to accept the CRISA funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so I think that drives us now to Tony. You got an update on the airports?
Good morning. Yes, I do.
Good to see you, Tony.
Good to see you all. 1 second while I set my screen up. Okay, do you see a page with the airports update? Okay. So good morning, members of the board, Madam Chair. Last February, when I last presented, I had presented on some of the damage we had from winds and flooding, and that was just weeks before our significant icing event. And so I'll share some photos from that. This was middle of February, And these pictures I'm going to show you are at the Aurora State Airport, and they are just a couple of days into the event when temperatures started rising. So pavement conditions here were just barren wet, but a lot of the ice still remained, and this just shows the extent of icing that we had experienced at many of our valley airports, but specifically at the Aurora State Airport. So just some stats: the runway was closed for 3 days. The airport was without power completely for 6 days, and then partially without power for several more days. And as many of our tenants were trying to reconnect their power weeks later. The tower did remain open with power from the backup emergency generator, but it was the only thing on the field with power. Phone lines were down. The airfield had no lighting. Weather reporting equipment was very limited. And so there was just the tower for airspace and helicopter operations. And again, just a couple photos, the significance of the ice at Aurora. And I think on this sign, I measured close to, it was probably between an inch and a half of ice. And there I had broken it off. So a pretty significant event. And the extent of the damage at some of our valley airports was pretty much just downed power lines and fallen tree branches. And here there was some fence damage, but most of our airports got through relatively unscathed. In other news, Taylor Maliza is going to be joining us again for his 4th season as the temp, as we are ramping up for our seasonal airport maintenance and mowing this summer. He'll be joining us April 12th. And we're also working through replacing this service rig. This is what we use to haul our large tractor mowers to all 28 of our airports. Well, I'm sorry, with the exception of the Hawaii airport that we can't get to on land. But this vehicle is a 97. It's had 24 hard years of service. And so we will be replacing it this summer when the new truck is completed. Working with stakeholders. So I've had a couple of meetings recently with Curry County and their economic development office, their county commissioner, and some utility providers. There's funding available for possible funding available for bringing high-speed internet to the Cape Blanco State Airport. And the Oregon Department of Aviation, we really support this. We have long recognized the benefits and resiliency benefits that this airport will provide. And so we think bringing high-speed internet to the airport will play a critical role in that, and will also enable us to eventually provide services such as weather reporting, fueling, and not to mention serving our other hangar tenants. And then for the last several months, we've been busy working on other maintenance, just general building maintenance that was necessary, the south wall siding replacement there. We're also looking at some other building maintenance for the roof and paint. And then several of our airports we're working through some gate issues and repairing those, and then providing some improvements to the Toledo access road and some signage there and at the Pacific City State Airport. So our seasonal airports are still closed. And at this point, they're typically scheduled to open May 1st. Some of them may be delayed because we've had some fairly late season snowpack. So the best way to check for these 4 airports, the Crescent Lake Airport, McKenzie Bridge, Santiam Junction, and Tokiti, are to check the NOTAMs. They may be extended due to conditions. In other updates in Nehalem Bay, we still have the tie downs closed except for with prior permission. And then at Joseph, the beacon is out of service. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Yeah, a quick question on the Nehalem Bay. Remind me why the tie downs are closed. Is it ramp issues or is it something else?
It's primarily because of the camping at that airport, and with the airport being located within a state park, we've had to, it was around this time last year that we had to set a PPR because people were getting into closed portions of the park. And so this is just a way for us to communicate what can and cannot be done for camping at that airport.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from board members out there? Okay, with that, thank you very much. And the ice pictures those were impressive. Thank you.
Yeah,
It
thank
was
you.
really sad to see the nose wheel up on those single engines.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, well, let's hope that we don't, that's once in 100 years and we don't see this again for quite a bit.
Right.
All right, so Betty and Kathy, if I read everything correctly, the next event is a 30-minute lunch period. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if the board is okay, we could take lunch now and then just come back at 20 after 12. That's a 30-minute lunch break. Do I check that correct? Okay, so 20 after 12, we will see you all.
Recording is resumed. Madam Chair.
All right, Kathy, if you could poll the board members to make sure everybody's here.
Chair Meeker,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Granado,
I'm here.
John Barsalou,
I'm here.
Hilda Pareo,
Here.
Mark Peters,
Present.
Tom Kruger,
Here.
and who did I miss? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've missed somebody.
Did you get John?
Doug.
Doug, thank you. Doug, are you on? Doug Ferguson? So he's not back yet. So I'll watch for him to come back on, Madam Chair. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I guess we'll go ahead when Doug comes on, just make a note of it if you would for me, Kathy, just so I know he's there.
Will do.
In the meantime, Kristen, I think you have a legislative budget update for us. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So I will start by sharing my screen here. Okay, do you see my screen now? Okay, so yes, I'm going to do a legislative budget status update for you. So I just wanted to show you what our budget looks like right now and how we got there. So we started with our CSL, so that's our current service level budget. So that's just the budget that's just stripped away before we add or subtract anything. And then in the summer of 2020, the board voted on our policy option packages and we added those to the budget. And then reductions were made due to revenue shortfalls at that time. And then the agency submitted our ARB, which is our agency request budget. And then in the fall of 20, during the governor budget process, all POPs were eliminated. So this was done statewide. This wasn't just for our agency. And this is the first time it's happened as I've done a budget. So that was new to me, but it was because of all of the revenue uncertainties during this session. So what we did at that time is we made an appeal to get all of our POPs put back into the budget. And we were able to successfully get POP 100, which is the fuel tax sunset removal, and POP 103, which is the toll structure fee analysis, put back into the budget. But the capital construction projects were not added back yet. So what this means is, so for any projects that we have that are over $1 million, we'll have to take another step to get those added back into the budget. So this could be during session, or this could be during a future emergency board. So it's just another step that we're going to have to take in the process. In February 21, the session started, and then the agency submitted our governor's budget, which was down 4.2 million or 13% compared to our last biennium's legislatively adopted budget. And then we presented our budget to the legislature, and right now the session is underway. This next slide, I wanted to show you what our budget is actually looking like right now compared to what it was last biennium. So in the red, that is last biennium's budget. So that's the legislatively adopted budget that we got at the end. And then in blue is where we are right now in our governor's budget for this biennium. So these are all of the program areas. So first you'll see capital construction. So as I mentioned, we don't yet have a capital construction budget. So last biennium we had close to 8 million. And so we're going to have to get those added in individually as we go along with those projects. For the aircraft registration program, the budget is about the same as last biennium because we didn't have revenue reductions in aircraft registration, luckily, because the aircraft registration revenue funds our grant match. So even though it's a small program, it's very important for us. The pavement maintenance program, the PMP, was down about 700,000, and that's because this program is funded by fuel tax revenue. The ASAP program this biennium, we actually budgeted more, and it's not because we have more revenue coming in this program, but it's because we budgeted for some of the carryover cash balance that we had. So that's from previous grant cycles so that we can expend all of those grants and then award more grants in this biennium. The operations program is down about 300,000. So that's actually really good compared to how much our revenue was down. So we were able to increase that budget because of some of the federal funding that we received and will be receiving, and because we put in this biennium a transfer of about 700,000 from the ROAR program to help with operations. And then the last program is the General Aviation Entitlement Program. So this is for all of our projects that are under $1 million. And we have a really healthy budget this biennium for that. We have about 4.6 million, so just a little over what we had last biennium. So there was no reduction there in our smaller projects, so that is good. So overall, last biennium we had about 31 million, and this biennium at this time we have 27 million. So the next step is when session concludes, we'll complete the 21-23 LAB, and then at a future board meeting, the board will approve that budget so that way we can execute the budget. It'll start July 1st of 2021, and then we'll be able to use that budget through June 30th of 2023. And then if we have any additions to the budget, such as projects or anything else, that will be a future emergency board, and that'll be a future vote for this board also to include that into our budget. So that was just a quick snapshot of what we're looking at. Do you have any questions?
Any questions from a board member out there? Kristen, I did have one on the capital construction. Was that just the building, or because I understand most of our runway and our airport operations are covered under the ASAP and other buckets of money?
So we had two projects that we put in there. So we had at Aurora, we had a obstruction removal and an EA.
That's right.
And at Siletz Bay, we had a runway rehab. So those were the two main projects, so that we're going to have to put those in, you know, like I said, at a future time.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that update. Now you'll keep chugging. We look forward to seeing the legislative budget coming up for the future years very soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, for that, now we get to the discussion on Sisters Eagle Airport. And before I turn it over to Heather, I just want to kind of see if I understand correctly the issue per se. As the board does every year, we vote to provide funds out to numerous airports around the state underneath our core project list for funding. In 2019, Sisters Eagle Airport was one of those grantees. So the way I understand it is those funds, we started talking with them back in February of 2019, not 2020, but 2019. And normally, if a project is not going to performance levels, it's a purely administrative process that the money is clawed back. But the way I understand it is this project never got into the acceptance by the staff because the matching money that the grantee was required to have never materialized. So as such, we're kind of caught in a weird thing because normally administrative rule would just take this back automatically. But because it never processed to the point where it was to be acceptable to the staff, we're kind of, it's an outlier. So as such, Heather, did I get that right? And can you give us a total amount that we're looking at for the Sisters Eagle Airport and the 2019 grant funds?
Kathy, do you have the total amount that you can put up? That would be great. And yes, so the grant was requested through the 2018-19 process, and it was awarded by the board in 2019. And we worked with Sisters Eagle Airport, who's been a great airport sponsor and fantastic to work with on other grants. But for this particular project, we don't have an executed agreement. It's the only one for 2019 that we've never been able to get an executed agreement because they weren't able to secure funding for that project.
Okay.
So you did have that accurate, and that was, and we did work with them throughout 2019 and even went down to visit the airport and look at a few things during that time. And then even contacted them in the beginning of 2020, pre-pandemic. Remember, this program is primarily for shovel-ready projects and projects that can move forward very quickly. And that's why we issue the grants that we do. And so this money is sitting in an account ready to go.
Okay. So, and also as part of this, Kathy, procedurally wise, do we need to read the letter, or is it good enough to say that the letter from Eagle Air, Sisters Eagle Airport was received and is accepted by the board?
Madam Chair, the letter from Eagle Air, Sisters Eagle Air, is part of the record.
Okay.
And as a written comment.
Okay. So they're requesting a 3-month delay. You know, from just my perspective, they can reapply in 2021, and we're going to start that grant process coming up here. You'll engage with the airport starting, jeepers, in August, July?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm not sure what a 3-month a 3-month wait would do, but I do want to give Benny a chance to address why he thinks 3 months versus just waiting and reapplying for the next grant cycle. So Benny, if you're on.
Can you hear me?
All right, Julie, we got you.
Oh,
we got you.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of tag team today. So
Gotcha.
I'm Julie Benson, co-owner of the airport, and the reason for the 3-month delay is we have secured funding, private funding from a contractor. So, but just getting all of the contracts and everything executed will probably take another month or so. But we do think we're in a position to do the construction this summer. So it just has taken us through 2020 to find other sources. Also note that we don't have any other sources of funding for any projects at our airport. We're not a NIPIAS airport, so the match funding is virtually all of us. So we're not waiting on match funding from another agency or anything. We make up virtually all the rest of the funding. And for this particular project, it's about 6% The core grant comprises about 6% of the project cost. So for us to come up with the other 94% is a pretty big step for us. And we had some we had some issues, as Benny said earlier, with the banking institutions this year, but we think we have solved that for this year. So we are planning to move forward with construction this summer. So we just need a little bit more time to get the contract in place. And we did try to establish the agreement online, but when it asked for a copy of the documentation for the financing, at that time we were not able to supply that. So that's why we weren't able to execute an agreement yet.
Understand that. And then just to be clear, the way I understand is the grant is given on the basis that funding is available immediately when the grant is given. So if I understand my staff correctly, the funding should have been in place in February 2019. Is that correct, Heather? Okay.
And yes, that is correct.
And it was, we thought, and then it wasn't. So.
Okay. Let me open it up to any questions from the board members. Anybody out there want to address any concerns they have or any questions they may have?
Chair Meeker, I guess I just want to make sure I'm fully understanding the sequence and the facts here, and I guess what happens under either path. So the grant was awarded in February of 19. Okay. And again, these are supposed to be shovel-ready projects. And I assume the construction was going to happen in the summer of 19. So that part is concerning to me. I get 20, but 19, we weren't there. So it's going to, just the clock runs out here at or has run out on the use. On the grant itself, is that correct? Because you're asking for a delay of what? So the clock has run out, Heather? Is that how that works?
So we are asking the board to either rescind the grant so that we can put it back into the queue and award it to shovel-ready projects, and then Sisters Eagle Airport can reapply when they have full funding. And then be able for the projects that they've already applied for, for other, for this last grant cycle, they were in a queue, but since they weren't able to execute this grant, it kind of puts their other projects on hold, right, through this funding cycle as well, because we weren't able to execute this grant. So if we remove this, then if there is funding that becomes available from, for instance, as Betty alluded to, 100% match through AIP, we'll be able to work down the 3 bucket, right, and be able to get into those. If they had projects listed in there, then they would qualify for them. But right now they can't because we cannot execute this one from 2019.
Heather, I want to interject here. I think we're mixing core grant years. The board voted on the 2020 specifically to exclude Sisters Eagle Airport. So unless we want to reopen that vote, they are out of the 2020 cycle. That's specifically what we voted on. We voted on that last board member. So what we then talked about at that board was we didn't want to then go ahead and pull their 2019 funds because Julie and Benny weren't on that session to talk. So we wanted to give them a chance to talk. So this is only about the recension of the 2019 funds. They cannot receive 2020 funds because the board excluded them from 2020. They can reapply for the 2021 unless the board
Yes, they could reapply for 2021 grants for the grants that they had applied for in 2020, and also this one too if it is shovel ready at that time.
Okay. I'm sorry, but
that's good. So if the money doesn't get awarded, where does it go? Is it available for, what is it available for instead?
It's sitting in a bank account available for a project right now. Because this is not bonded money. This is money that's been collected and ready to fund a project.
So which projects would get funded with this instead?
We would have to come to the board for that one because of the selection process that was done, right, Kathy?
Correct. At this point, because the 2021 group was funded up to a total of $250,000. So the cut line is going to drop significantly once the AIP grants are awarded at 100%. That said, we're going to open up the cycle for 21-22. Any additional funds will be in the pot available for the board to award a lump sum to the 21-22 applicants, much like we did with the 21. But when you approve the 18-19, which is what we're talking about, or no, the 19-20, the 19s is what we're talking about. You didn't do it with a total grant allocation. You actually established the cut line. So the money would not go to another grant in that cycle. But it would be cycled into the upcoming cycle as part of the carryover funds.
All right.
John has a question.
So if I might, Chair, I guess I just want to clarify, Kathy, then with you. So, and Heather, the money then, because of the 100% match, all of that money is being rolled over into 2021, and you're saying there's more money available in 2021, even though regardless of whether or not the sunset passes or not. Is that correct? Because we're not issuing any grants because of the 100% match, right? Or the grants for the match.
Well, we're not when the airports get notification that they have 100%, they are asked to withdraw their grants. But
right.
The board approved the entire list and
right.
spend up to the cap of 250,000, or no, 2.5
million.
2.5 million.
Well, what's a few zeros? 2.5 million. That cut line will drop until those dollars are expended through going down the list of approved grants.
If memory serves, and maybe I'm wrong, then we probably have extra money.
No.
Then, right? No, we won't have extra money? Betty, then, so what?
No. So
no.
In the hold on a second, Heather. In the priority ones were the 10%, the local match.
Right.
And so that was, I want to say around 2 million. So
right.
without that, we move into the number in the priority twos.
Right.
And then we go into the priority threes, and the priority threes are about, I want to say about 2.5 to 3 million. The total asks out of this last grant cycle was 5 million, and you had 2.5 million to spend. So if we don't fund have to fund the priority one local matches, then we move into the twos and the threes, and that will expend all of the funds.
Okay.
If you want exact numbers, I can
put
those for you, but that's kind of.
Okay, all right, no, I was just
So,
generally.
Yeah, this will allow us for the first time to reach almost all of the threes, which we have not ever been able to do before.
Right.
So, Heather, did I get
And
that right?
You did, and there's a financial implication too. So because in our budget cycle, we have to ask to expend money, right? This is going to be a carryover that may not have already been included in this year's funding because we had asked to, it should have been expended already. Does that make sense? We've had approval to expend this in this biennium. If we are going to extend it, we need to add it to next biennium. So this is problematic for carrying over. Does that make sense? Because it should have actually been done and on the way to close out. So we would either have to add this to next biennium.
And the only reason I'm sensitive to this is because I had to give $2.8 million back to the Connect Oregon folks because I couldn't find a tenant, and I didn't want to build another empty building in the state. And so I'm very, very sensitive to this issue. And if a couple more months, to me, it's like, all right, but only if a couple more months, and then it's a couple more months, and it's a couple more months, then I'm saying no, then we should be done. But I'm just sensitive to that issue. Excuse me. That's what I had to say. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned more about precedent, and I'm not sure what the argument is strong enough in my mind to say, okay, I'll give you 3 more months. If this would have been awarded in 20, okay, I think there's some a once in a hopefully lifetime event that's been going on, but this was February of 19, and I don't know that we've done this before where we've allowed more delays for others. I don't know if we have or not, and I'm a little concerned about the precedent of doing that, especially on something that was should have been shovel ready and ready to go. I'm not sure I've heard anything strong enough. Sorry, Julie, that of doing this just again because I'm concerned about the other folks that will say, well, I'll just roll the dice here and I'll tell them that I'm going to have funding, and then if I don't, I can get a delay and I can push it out, and that's my concern.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Any other board member would like to ask a question? Any other board member who'd like to make a comment? Okay, hearing that, I would like to make a comment similar to Vince's. If this had entered into where they had executed an agreement, administratively, this had already been clawed back. So we've established the precedence that if you can't perform, the money returns. I think this is not performing. They didn't meet the requirements of the 2019 grant cycle. So that's just me. Going forward, though, I just want to clarify on what something Heather had said. You said, Heather, this needs to roll into the next biennium. This is monies from 2018, 2019. Is the next biennium then, in your mind, this money rolls to 21? If so, we've already agreed to that core cycle, which means if we need to roll this money into that core cycle, then it would just fall, it would cascade down into the list that we've already approved. Did I get that right?
You did, but it's also it's a budgetary issue too. I need to work with Kristen to make sure that it moves with it. Does that make sense? We have to budget all of our money and the expenditures out, and this was previously budgeted to be fully expended within the last 2 bienniums, and then we just need to make sure that we can carry it over and that we haven't, so that we can actually spend it, right? Because it should have been done, and then will be required to be completely expended by June 30 anyways, no matter what, if we don't write the books.
Okay, but writing the books, Kristen, I'm supposing this is a technicality this is a carryover. We're not going to lose the funds.
We are not going to lose the funds, but we still do have to move the funds.
Yeah, I understand that. So my next question would be, do you intend as staff to roll these funds into the 2021 cycle, which means we will have an additional $100,000+ for this current, we will get to notify another airport of some good news? Or is it your intention to roll it into the 21-22 cycle, or you just don't know yet?
Well, we haven't gone that far yet, but I would like to be able, if there's a shovel-ready project, to tell the next airport on the list and bring that before you all in the next meeting that we have, to ask permission to do that.
All right. Do you need our permission since we've already approved a list?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, because you would be increasing the spending cap from 2.5 million to 2.65 million.
But don't we already have a list of projects that would suck in all that money already?
We have the list of projects. We would just, the cut line would then go until we have the cap. We have met the cap of 2.65 million expended or obligated. Right now, we can only go up to 2.5 million.
So the only board action would be to increase the cap.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so once again, before I go to a vote here, real quick, we do have to vote to either rescind or retain Sisters Eagle Airport's funding. As I said before, this never made it into an executive agreement, so it never made it into the administrative process, which leaves resolution of this to the board.
Correct.
So any questions before I ask for a vote?
I think I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
You bet you
So-
are. Go ahead.
So if we, if you rescind this, we were taken off the list for the 2021, the tier 3 list, because we hadn't used this one yet. If you rescind it, do we get to get back on the list?
Not unless we decide to open up. We intentionally removed you from the list due to poor performance.
Right. So
Or not
if,
poor performance, non-performance. Let me put it that way. I don't want-
right. So in rescinding the 2019 funds and putting it back into the pot, would we then be eligible for the next, for this cycle?
Not for
Like,
this
could we,
cycle.
in other words, can we get back on the list once those for other projects?
Not unless the board would like to vote to reopen the vote that they took at the last board meeting, approving the core grantees for the 2021 cycle.
Right. So sounds like you're going to have to vote anyway to raise the funds up to 2.65.
That would be at the next board meeting.
So in that same vote, could we get back on the list?
I can poll the board to see if they have any interest in taking that to vote. I would be honest, I don't. I am still standing my decision of the last core grant discussion, but let me poll the board members. Okay, so with that, let me get to the resolution of the 2018-2019 grant funds first, and then we'll go back around and we'll poll the staff to see if there are staff and board to see if there's an interest to reopen the board vote from the core grant discussion that happened in February on the 2020-2021 grant cycle. So we got a couple of different year actions going on. So let me take care of the oldest grant action first, which is on the funds that were committed to Sisters Eagle Airport in the 2018-2019 grant cycle. As such, I'm going to have a motion that rescinds. So if they make if you say yay to this motion, or if you propose a motion or a second a motion, you are proposing to rescind the funds from Sisters Eagle Airport. As such, do I have a motion that the State Aviation Board rescind the Grant Corps 2019 6KS 00048 Sisters Eagle Airport, and that the airport sponsor still be eligible, though, to apply for the core grants in future cycles starting with the 21-22 cycle? Do I have a first motion?
So moved.
I have a first motion by Vince. Do I have a second from the board?
Second from Mark.
Okay, I have a second from Mark Peters. With that, all those who approve of rescinding the funds, say aye.
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 Any who are opposed to rescinding the funds, say nay. Okay, hearing none, then the State Aviation Board approves the rescission of the grant in the core 2019 6KS 0048 to Sisters Eagle Airport, and that but keeping the airport sponsor eligible to apply for the next core grants in the 21-22 cycle. Okay, now let me move to the 2021 core grants that we provided and approved in the February 4, 2021 board. Julie has requested a poll of the board members to see if you are interested on going back and reopening that to allow Sisters Eagle Airport to apply within that grant cycle. For those, as a reminder, we specifically excluded Sisters Eagle Airport during that discussion, as was recommended by the Aviation Review Committee and the staff.
Chair Meeker,
Go ahead.
a question on this, and it's more procedural than anything, is that do we need to open it back up, or can we reinstate eligibility for the applications that had already been submitted?
Okay, let me put the poll this way. How about if I just leave it generic to say reinstatement? This is just to see if the board has an interest in taking this to a larger discussion. And Kathy, what do you think about that being the board secretary?
So the board would like to look at
I just want
the
to ask the
question
board.
of considering eligibility of the sisters airports grants 51, 52, 55, and 61. There were 4 of them.
Okay.
And take that up at the next meeting.
I want to know if there's any interest in allowing them to get back into the cycle. I just want to ask, is there an interest? And then if there is an interest, then we'll tee it up on how we want to do it. So with that,
I would like to see the list if it's okay, Chair. I'd like to see the list again before, but I think at least it's something to consider.
okay, so we have John Barcelo has said that he would like to consider it. So I think if we have a board member that wants to consider it, I think it's worthy of bringing it to the next board discussion. Is there any board member who's opposed? Let me ask that.
I guess I'm not sure exactly what that means to reconsider this. And because in the February meeting, we made decisions, correct, about how we were going to allocate the dollars. So you can make them eligible, but we've already awarded the dollars. So are you saying you want to reallocate the dollars?
This is what we'd have to, if we're honestly going to do them duty and allow them to compete, then what we'd have to do is allow for the possibility that we will pull somebody else's grant in order to give it to Sisters Eagle Airport. Yes.
Well, I guess that's why I guess I'm interested in seeing the list to see where that would fall and where the sisters projects fall into the list. And I guess I'd have to go back and look at that. And maybe this is just for discussion.
That was in the previous board minutes. We can bring that forward.
Would you like me to screen share it?
Go ahead, Kathy.
If board chair, if I may, staff worked a lot with this applicant prior to this and put together a staff report that took a lot of decision to get there. And we worked with Sisters Eagle Airport to see if they wanted to go ahead and just rescind their grant at that time, so that we wouldn't have to have those 4 projects be removed via our staff recommendations because of this. So now we are all the way going back there again. And we'll have to do a staff report on our recommendations to the board too, moving forward.
No, that's not what I was after. I appreciate seeing the list again. Thank you very much, Kathy.
And Heather, to address your question, we would not ask the staff to do anything until there's a formal board vote to reopen this cycle. This is a discussion of whether we want to do that vote at a future board meeting.
Okay.
If we decided that we wanted to reopen the cycle, then we're going to redo the cycle.
Okay.
I would have to, sorry, I would have to assume some folks are already down the path.
Yep.
Yeah. I would agree. Yeah. I'll rescind what I said then, and we'll just move forward. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So Chair Meeker, to make this all official, what I would like to propose, and again, this was all exploratory in our conversation, is that we are not, I move that we do not reopen the 2021 cycle at this time. However, know that sisters will be eligible for the next cycle moving forward.
Okay. Do we need to vote, Kathy, where do we wait until we public notice this at the next board meeting so we can do it formally? What's your recommendation?
Well, we have a motion. We don't have a second. I believe it's within the rules to allow for the board to make a motion from the floor,
Okay,
because this is in regards to an agenda item. So unless I'm mistaken, I believe that is permissible. At this time, I don't know if you need a motion to suspend the rules to take up the matter, but you're already discussing the matter.
okay.
So
All
I
right.
have a motion, but I do not have a second yet.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mark to not reopen the core grant 21, 22 cycle.
2021. I'm sorry, 21, 22, yes.
21, 22 cycle. So a motion not to reopen the fiscal year 2021, 22 core grant cycle. A little bit
20
wordy, but
Since it was not my intent to do that, but just have this discussion, I'll go ahead and second that motion.
I have a second motion not to reopen the core grant cycle. Whoosh.
Madam Chair, the other part of the motion that I heard was that in addition, the Sisters Eagle Airport would be eligible for grants in the subsequent cycles.
Okay.
Did I correctly state that, Mark?
Okay, we can restate that. We just stated that in our previous
Right.
vote, but we can restate it again.
I think the intent of my motion is that I think that we're all in general agreement on where we want to go with this. My thought was, let's make it official, but also reinforce that we want to work with sisters in the future. That's it.
Understand. So Kathy, please reaffirm what we have just heard a motion and a second motion on.
The motion is for the Aviation Board to not reopen the core cycle 2020-21, and to also state that the Sisters Eagle Air is eligible for grants in subsequent cycles.
Okay, and once again, we're not going to reopen the 21-22 cycle, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, with that, all those who approve the motion say, whoop, Kathy's got a look on her face.
2021.
It's 2021.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, because 2021, 22 is the one coming up.
Yes.
It's because of our weirdness of our fiscal year.
Right.
All right.
So this is 2020, 2021.
All right. I think I messed it all up. So we're going to approve not reopening the 2021 and allowing sisters to remain eligible for future core grants. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing that, then the State Aviation Board approves not reopening the core cycle 2021 and allowing sisters to remain eligible for future core grants. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And Julie, we look forward to your application coming in. It'll just be a few months delayed.
All righty.
Okay, thanks. Okay, with that, it's on to talk about Joseph State Airport.
Madam Chair, just to kind of close out this agenda item, I was asked to bring a status overview for the core cycle. So I will briefly share this slide so you can see where we're at, if that's all right with you.
Thank you, Kathy.
So this encapsulates where we are currently with the core grants. This year, the 16-17 cycle of the 31 grants, 30 are closed. And one, it remains open, but it is in closing. Of the 2018s, of the 24 grants, 15 are closed. And of the 9 opens, 2 are in closing. Of the 2019s, we have of 24 grants, The one is in setup that will now be withdrawn. We have 21 of them that are open and 3 of them are in closing and 2 are closed. 2020 is the weird one that we only did 4. And we are about to execute our 3rd grant. And of the 2020-2021 cycle, the 28 grants that are currently funded up to the limit of $2.5 million, 5 of them are in grant setup. I think that's now 6. And we haven't finished executing grants. We're in the process of doing that. But because of the federal changes that look like they're coming regarding the AIP grants, standby 1, we're going to probably be making a significant change in this number and then bring on the additional grants that will be eligible as the AIP match ones are withdrawn. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Just a quick one. What one do we still have hanging out from 2017?
It's one that's almost closed. The retainage is just about to pay off. So it was one from Madras that took a little extra time, and but the retainage should be paying off any day now, and that one's closed.
Okay.
It was due to the FAA actually.
Yep.
Not closing out that grant.
We've got a couple of them like that where the FAA's been sitting on closeout papers for a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if you can move heaven and earth, they'll close.
Yeah, the FAA has been terrible about some of that stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Super. Okay, Heather, back to you and talk a little bit about, I think it's back to you for Joseph Airport update.
Yes, actually, I'm going to have Sarah Lucas, our aviation planner that's located in Eastern Oregon and has been the project coordinator and local to this project, go ahead and give the presentation and be able to share her screen and walk you through where we are today with the Joseph State Airport Master Plan and the last meeting, which was our alternatives discussion and how things are looking to date. So Sarah, please take it away.
Sarah,
Thanks,
unmute.
Kathy.
There you go.
There's great things to love about living in Eastern Oregon, but sometimes your bandwidth is not one of them. So I pushed it, but my screen was frozen. So thank you for that. So again, thank you, board members and Chair Meeker, for letting us come to you today to give you a brief update on the project at Joseph State Airport. And before I get started, I just want to mention, if you have any questions during my presentation, please feel free to interrupt and ask. Again, this is for your benefit, so you have a full understanding of where we are, where we're headed, and when we come back for approval, you'll feel good about the decisions you're making. So, and my screen has froze up again. There we go. So we're just going to quickly go over the project purpose, the project team, schedule, our advisory committee membership and their involvement, the project components, the preferred alternative that ODA has prepared for you, and then also the next steps. So the last master plan for Joseph was 1993. Not only is it outdated and the community itself has changed, but the projects proposed in the 93 plan have largely been implemented. So we will be focusing on identifying and addressing any design deficiencies that are in the plan or at the airport, locating areas for development as the airport is rather constrained, and then responding to local needs as how they have changed over the last almost 30 years. We've contracted with Century West Engineering to do this work. Here at ODA, Heather Peck and myself have been working on this project, and Century West is Matt Rogers, David Miller, and Samantha Peterson. So we held an internal kickoff meeting back in January of 20 with the intention of public kickoff in spring of 20. And we all know what happened last spring. So while our public kickoff got postponed to July, we were able to get a lot of the existing conditions and inventory data gathered, as well as setting up the airport's geographic information system, which is AGIS survey, completed prior to that public kickoff in July. And we anticipate wrapping up this project in August of this year. So despite our slow start, we've been able to keep on project schedule. So I wanted to share this PAC membership list. One, just to show that we have a very wide range of interests and agencies involved in this project. We do meet the state agency coordination agreement requirements for the PAC membership, and the meetings have been very well attended, and board member Barsalou has joined all of them to date. And something else I wanted to point out is we do have student representatives on this advisory committee, which is the first that I've ever seen. Because Joseph Charter School does have an aviation program, we wanted to bring those kids in so they can see what the airport side and operations looks like. Again, our first kickoff meeting was in July of last year, and it was very well attended, but we also had a virtual function, and our feedback was that those virtual attendees could not hear the meeting as well as they would like. And, you know, we're all learning how to do this distance virtual meetings. And so we decided to have a recap meeting so that it was fully virtual, and everybody was on the same page as far as information. In October, we had another PAC meeting to discuss the forecast. And then most recently, we discussed in February the facility requirements and alternatives. And we have 2 more meetings scheduled to discuss the preferred alternative and then the final plan. I'm pretty sure you guys are very familiar with project components now. After today, Heather did a great job of explaining what the master plan process looks like. And right now where we are is in the alternatives analysis, exploring solutions for how we move forward into the implementation phase. Just a really quick, to provide context to the study, we have the introduction chapter, and it just gives relevance to the airport and the community. And going into it, we had talked with a lot of stakeholders at Joseph to understand some specific issues they have. And one of them is, as a rural and remote county, they need an instrument approach at the airport so that they can have a life flight response in low visibility conditions. So we included the AGIS survey to assist us with an instrument approach feasibility study. And that is not typically included in a master plan update. So that was something that we added into the scope of work to go above and beyond, since we knew that that was an issue very near and dear to the community. And then also there are site constraints. I think most board members have been at Joseph, and just directly south of the runway, there is a cemetery. And then just a little farther south of that, we have the beautiful Eagle Cap Mountains. And then to the north and northeast, there's also the source to the City of Enterprise watersheds. So that is an environmental consideration that we won't develop on that portion of the airport. Now this graphic here on the existing conditions, I just think is, it tells the story. So in '93, what we had was just a 3,800 foot strip with no taxiway. And then you look at today, you have a 5,200 foot runway with a full parallel taxiway. So since '93, the state and with their partners, the FAA, have put in a lot of capital to acquire property, to build that runway and taxiway system, and then all of the runway lighting and visual aids that go along with that. They've installed the weather station and then the road access and terminal area development that you can see here on the south end of the airport. The aeronautical activity forecast we used, even though they're prepared in 2020, we used 2019 as a base year because 1, it gave us a full calendar year of data, and 2, it gave us pre-COVID indicators, and hopefully we'll be getting back into that cycle here soon. But there are currently 12 based aircraft at the airport and just over 4,000 annual operations. In looking at the local conditions, while the average annual growth rate of 1.96 is fairly modest, it is more aggressive than state and regional forecasts. And that is because the hangar construction, fuel sales, and increase in tourism, those all outpace the other models that we looked at. So we kind of went in the middle at almost 2% average annual growth rate. The based aircraft, we use the non-towered rule of thumb of 250 operations per based aircraft, which is what you would typically see at a small GA airport like Joseph. However, we did add in some of the local considerations, predominantly the medevac. We worked closely with the hospital and Life Flight Network to get a good handle on their use of the airport. There's an annual fly-in at Joseph that is very well attended, that gives a real big boost in August on those operations. And then there is firefighting activity. The Forest Service does use it as a staging area for helicopters when there is a wildland fire in the region. So looking at that, well, over the 20-year forecast period, we have an increase in 6 based aircraft, and those operations per based aircraft increase slightly with that growth rate. Before moving forward, are there any questions? All right, hearing none.
Heather,
Oh, yes.
I just want to, with the increased growth annualized into that, any issues with the ODA buying off on that? That's one of those factors that they do kind of pay attention to.
No, I think the FAA, they've attended our meetings and they have this information, and I have not heard anything different from them. So I think it is acceptable.
And then to take that farther, Ben Mello is our representative, the community planner for this airport, and we have bi-weekly meetings with our consultant, and Ben is on those calls every other Friday. And the FAA did approve those forecasts, and they approved them fairly quickly, quicker than I've ever seen. Within a month of our submittal, they had written back that forecasts were approved.
Okay, thanks, I appreciate it.
Yep.
That has never happened in the last 10 years on any project.
Absolutely. We were all very pleased with that. So moving forward, looking at the facility requirements and future talk, we're kind of breaking it down to the air side and the land side. And again, the air side is more the aircraft movement, landing, takeoff environment versus the tie downs, hangars, and whatnot on the land side. So 3 main things came out of the facility requirements of what we'll need. And again, the instrument approach, and we're specifically looking at either a non-precision straight-in or circling approach. We worked with FAA flight procedures to have them kind of run some preliminary numbers on what the minimums could look like based on the information they have at that airport. So we built that into our considerations. And for those who don't know the difference, a non-precision straight-in versus circling, they both are, as it says, non-precision, but a circling approach guides a pilot to the airport environment, not to a specific runway end. So the airspace that you protect for is no different than what you'd protect for a visual airspace. The straight-in is different in that it gives pilot guidance to a specific runway end. Therefore, even though it's non-precision, it's a little more precise, and you have a larger area of airspace that you have to protect. Another thing we identified through the Aegis survey is some taxiway object-free area obstructions, and that's on the north end of the parallel taxiway where there is a fence built up that where the berm was built to reinforce that fence, it's penetrating that TOFA. And then also the existing apron at the fuel station is very difficult for larger aircraft to get in and maneuver. So expanding that, and then also removing direct access to the runway, because again, the FAA does not like pilots not having to make a decision on something. You know, they want you to turn before just taxiing straight onto a runway. So you'll see that in our alternatives. On the land side, right now, all the aircraft are hangared because the climate in Joseph, you just would not want to invest in an aircraft and have it sitting on the ramp. And so if we are anticipating 6 more based aircraft, we have added in a development reserve showing the need for an additional 12 hangars at the airport. In that analysis, we also have identified that there's an excess of tie downs for small aircraft. And so maybe looking at reconfiguring how we can accommodate larger aircraft like the PC-12 that Life Flight operates, helicopters, and then also firefighting staging areas. And again, if anybody's been at Joseph, I think this next bullet point speaks for itself. The pilot lounge is in need of replacement, and we would prefer to replace that with a multi-use facility that responds more to what the community really needs. And then vehicle parking and access to accommodate all of that. So when we looked at the alternatives, all of these alternatives, we had an option A and B, and that really was just to show the impacts of the difference of a circling versus a straight in approach. And for brevity, I did not include those graphics in here. I do have them at the end of just for reference, if anybody wants me to flip at them to look. But if you were to upgrade to a non-precision straight in approach, quite a few of the existing hangars would become obstructions, and it would be the ultimate removal at the end of the hangar's useful life of 5 hangars, which is half of what is there right now. So the first alternative, we looked at building out the South Apron area, all of the state-owned airport property first to see what we can build there. And then alternative 2 is looking at expanding to the west to some City of Joseph owned property that currently has a recycling transfer station. So it's about 2 acres of potential acquisition on the west side to accommodate hangars. And then we also took a look on the east side, which is the old mill site that has been cleaned up, at what that would look like if we were to develop to the east. And of course, there's different considerations on the east side development since there is no taxiway system to support that, and also no support from FAA to build a second taxiway system on the other side. So before the PAC meeting, we did talk extensively with Life Flight Network because, again, the impetus for the instrument approach really was their needs for medical evacuation. This is a high priority, not just in Loudoun County, but statewide for the medical system. And was able to talk to their assistant chief pilot, and basically they said, we just need an approach. We don't need anything specific. We just need the ability to file and attempt to go to Loudoun County in times of low visibility. And I will mention that, especially with the wildfire seasons we've been having, low visibility is happening in the middle of the summer when you typically wouldn't expect weather, but the smoke is becoming an issue. So the consensus from talking with the public and the advisory committee was that ODA should first build out the south end before looking anywhere offsite for property acquisition. But then there was really no clear path to ODA and what the community preferred if we were to either look to the east or the west first. So we'll talk about that here in a moment. And then but predominantly the instrument approach circling really floated to the top as the clear winner because of the impacts that a straight in approach would have to the airport and its facilities. So the preferred alternative on the air side, we have that circling, clearing of the taxiway object free area that we've discussed, and then removing some pavement near the fuel apron so that there's basically there will be an island that pilots would have to maneuver around so that they could access the runway, and that's an FAA design standard issue. And no changes to the runway itself. So I understand at this scale, it's going to be very difficult for you to really see details, but I just want to point out a couple of things here on the north end, which is on the left-hand side. This small red area, that is the TOFA penetrations that we're discussing. And that's really the only graphic where you'll see that. And then here in a moment, I'll get a closer zoom in. But so our priority on the land side is, again, looking at the South Apron area and reconfiguring that to maximize development. And we found that we can put 7 conventional hangars in that area, along with a replacement and relocation of the existing pilot building with a mixed use building that would be able to accommodate a 2-story building in the location we've presenting. Removing 12 of the small airplane tie downs so that we can accommodate kind of a throughway for the PC-12 and other larger aircraft that visit the airport. Reconfigured vehicle access and parking, gate upgrades, which is more of a maintenance issue that has been identified as well, and then expanding the fueling apron. And I'm going to skip a little bit over this. I think I'd like to talk with the graphic for some of these. So what ODA has decided is that we would rather pursue purchasing of the 2 acres on the west area from the city of Joseph to accommodate the forecasted demand. But we also are going to leave in as a very high level concept of East Side development, because again, as we all know, with property acquisition, sometimes issues arise that aren't anticipated, and this will give the plan a little more flexibility. So this detailed image here on the south end, the pink is just parking, but what I really want to point out is the green, all of these new buildings, and you'll see the existing FBO pilot area being removed and a hangar being constructed there. If you travel a little farther north, this red area, this is the island that I've discussed that would be removing that pavement so that there was no straight access from fueling to runway 33 with an expansion. And then you'll see here the west side, the proposed development of conventional hangars and T hangars if there was interest to build a T hangar unit here. And again, while it's only 1.9 acres, it does accommodate all of the forecasted demand for based aircraft. And then we included on the east side just a very high level concept of what it could look like for developing on the east side in case property acquisition on the west side was not possible. So I'd like to pause again. Does anybody have any questions with this visual up?
Sarah, sorry, I'm one of the non-aviation experts here. So 2 questions for you. Well, first comment, thank you. This is your presentation has been excellent for somebody like me who doesn't understand a lot of this stuff. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. T hangar, what is a T hangar compared?
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
And thanks. So a T hangar is a multi-use building, so it will have dividers. So if you were to kind of do an X-ray view of that long rectangle, it will have a T shape stacked this way and then one nested the other direction. So you'd have doors on both sides, so you can nest in back in aircraft. And you can, I believe this one would accommodate 8 individual T hangar units. And the advantage of that is kind of multifold, but something like this is typically a developer or an airport sponsor would build the T hangar unit and then rent out individual space rather than putting all of the development cost on a tenant for them to build a hangar up front and lease the ground.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Again, wonderful presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Something that I just wanted to point out too that I overlooked, if you can see this detail that's kind of in the middle of the South Apron development area, you'll see that we've added kind of a passing lane, and that passing lane is for if the PC-12, when they do also get some Cessna Citation and smaller business jets here, that when they park in the apron, they block access so aircraft can't taxi down the taxi lane. So this is kind of just a pull-out expansion area where larger aircraft could park and still allow for smaller aircraft to taxi by.
Sarah, hang on just a sec. John, did you have a question?
I just thank you, Kathy. I just wanted to say thank you both to Sarah, Heather, and Tony. You guys did a great job at the last meeting, and just talking and hearing what the public was saying and some of the pilots were concerned. And I think you guys addressed them along with
All right. Well, thank you, John. I appreciate that. And we do appreciate your time for being on those advisory committee meetings. And again, I've been really pleased with the community's input and involvement in this project. We definitely have them engaged in the process, which always makes for a better master plan. So moving forward, like I said, our next advisory committee meeting should be in about 6 weeks, and that will be to present this preferred alternative that ODA has prepared for you today. And then moving forward, it's kind of the wrap up part of the master plan, the capital improvement and financial plans, airport layout plan drawings, and then the recycling and solid waste management plan. That will all be presented in August for the final PAC meeting. And then we will turn around and submit that ALP to the FAA for review and approval prior to bringing it to the board. So that's the end of my presentation. I thank you for your time again. And if you have any questions, we're here.
So any questions from any board member? Heather, I had one, and Tony, for you to kind of long-term operations at the airport itself. For the 4 hangars that would be considered an obstruction if we had went with a straight-in approach, looking long-term out in the future, is there any plans to, as development perhaps becomes on the south side of the airport, any thoughts longer term on trying to get the tenants of those 4 particular hangars moved off to anything new that may show up on the southern end, with the thought of decommissioning those 4 hangars long term? Because eventually, if you continue growing that airport, we're going to want a straight-in approach. True, false?
Right. So I'll address that really quick. I think there's strong interest in going with the circling approach for now to mitigate those impacts to these existing hangars. I think if we go through with the property acquisition, that would certainly allow us more opportunity to consider the straight-in approach by having suitable land to replace the loss of those hangars. But I think right now, because of the limitations in available space that we have right now, I think the strong preference is to preserve the hangars that we have. Does that answer your question?
It does. I'm looking beyond the master plan, just in the back of your head, if an opportunity would arise, just fortunes of luck, where, you got a chance to decommission an airport, just something we need to keep in mind, that if that airport grows, when we redo this master plan in 10 to 15 years, do we ever get the airport into a configuration that allows for a straight in?
Right. Yeah, and very much could be a possibility. And ideally, as you suggested, if both could be accomplished at the same time to mitigate the loss of the hangars and include the straight-in approach, then I'm certainly on board.
Okay. All right, super. And Sarah, once again, you guys are, you're doing good work out there. And Tom, you weren't here when we brought Sarah on, but she's actually in the Joseph community, well respected, and she has been tremendous as kind of our outreach, so that we have somebody there, a face on the ground per se, and that goes a long ways to making sure that we hear and fulfill the community needs.
I have operated in and out of the Joseph Airport, and so the photos look familiar to me.
Awesome. So cool.
What we're going to continue to do in the future, which builds on the master plan presentations I gave earlier, is to make sure at each preferred alternative decision point, the board is presented a larger presentation like Sarah provided today, so that we really get into the meat of everything, and that you can see everything and really get the feel of what's been going on, the decisions that have been made, and have a better feel of how the process has been going. And so every other update will just be, this is a progress update, except for when we get out of the alternatives.
Okay. All right. And then Sarah, just for me, how's the virtual, having a PAC meeting on the virtual platform? How is that happening?
It's different. And so our third PAC meeting was our first 100% virtual. We decided not to go with the mix. And It went surprisingly well. I will say, however, it's harder to pick on people. You know, when you're really wanting that to get that engagement, you can't make that eye contact to say, Bob, what are your thoughts on this? So that was something that we overcame, because I don't have a problem picking on people, even virtually, and asking them directly. But we've come up with some ideas on how to get more interactive, doing some live polls, perhaps, especially with alternatives. So it went as good as you can expect, but we hope to do even better next time.
Okay, well, great. Well, hopefully we can capture some of your best techniques, because, you know, allowing a little bit more virtual inside the PAC process, even if we go back to, you know, fully opening everything up again and we forget COVID altogether, it's still nice to offer those who may be either traveling or can't get to the PAC to at least the ability to hear what's being said. So you're paving the way for us here.
Well, thank you. And it absolutely will be something we carry forward. For instance, in Joseph, several of the adjacent property owners live out of state. And so for them to be able to be a part of the process and, you know, alleviate any fears they might have because of their distance, it has been a good tool.
Super. Well, thanks a lot. And you guys are doing great work. Thank you very much for your presentation. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, we got an update on the disparity report. Is that true?
Not the disparity report. I have a quick just update on just projects and where we are to date with them. The disparity study is finally in closeout and completed. We're awaiting the FAA is final acceptance of it, but we have heard nothing but positive reinforcement right now. And then what they will be doing with the disparity study is going to be the biggest question out there, and how they're going to incorporate it in the projects at each airport local level. So we don't know that yet, and we will brief the board once we get that information from the FAA.
Okay.
So I'm just going to give a quick overview on the projects update and the grants. Right now we're doing pavement evaluation. We just completed it at Scappoose. The consultants walked 12 miles in completing it. And we're getting ready to embark on Klamath Falls, Crater Lake, and I am guessing they'll be walking probably 10 times that when they get down there. We're programming the pavement maintenance program work for this summer. Right now, we're doing some final runs and getting ready to put that out for bid and packaging it up. The statewide disparity study, as I mentioned, is in closeout, which is great. It's been a very successful project, and Kathy did an amazing job coordinating that too with everything else that has been on her plate. The AIP projects that are on deck for this year and due today to the FAA for grants are the Chiloquin, Malino, and Aurora obstruction removal projects, and the where was that? Independence and Cottage Grove fence projects in their entirety, which we did not receive bids on. Hopefully we'll rerun them next week and be able to receive bids in 30 days after some more outreach. We're looking at the Siletz Bay runway rehabilitation project for AIP grants. The statewide rates and fees project is ongoing and 70% complete. We hope to have that completely done within the next couple of months and be able to get a product out to all of the airports in the system so that they can look at their rates and fees and see what's going on in the state and if they need to make adjustments and take that to their local boards and commissions. And then the core grant cycle, which we discussed a little bit earlier, but Kathy gave a great overview, but we are kind of waiting until the grant executions by the FAA proceed to make sure that they will really be funding at 100%. And if there's any that will not, that we pick up those grants and put them in our core process. So that's basically where we are with some projects. And you just had the Joseph State Airport Master Plan update, which Tony was left off of that, but he's been obviously a major part of the project team as well. So are there any questions? Oh, you're on mute, Martha.
All right, Zoom etiquette, there we go. Is there, going back to the core grant cycles, is there a way that we can put a rule or statute or some kind of governing guidance that if a grantee doesn't come to an executive agreement within a certain particular time, it's just administrative process that it either comes to the board or it's automatic, that grant is automatically rescinded?
We would like to bring that to a policy level board decision. I think we had to have it happen to figure out what we needed. And instead of, we're going to hopefully be working on rulemaking once the sunset is lifted. So we'll have to do that then anyways.
Okay.
We want to leave it open for, excuse me, policy level approvals, and that will be approved by the board. So if we have policy decisions that need to be made, we'll be working on those as well and bring to the board for your vote so that we can handle a lot of that stuff administratively.
It would be super, because if, if on this very weird occasion, this doesn't happen. Yes. This is the first one we've ever had in this entire core grant cycle, by the way, or discussion. But it would be nice if we could have had this early enough that we could have still re-rolled those funds back into that same grant cycle so that somebody else could have benefited.
Agreed.
Okay.
If I may add on, Heather?
Yes, please. Sorry.
So there's another piece also that we may need to bring into rulemaking. Right now, we do have a requirement that on the grants we're doing now, that if those funds are not expended within 2 years, unless it is amended, those grant funds, quote unquote, expire. The thing is, we don't have any process for expiring the grant. What happens to the rest of it? Do we go back and get the money back? I don't know that we have any process in place to actually do something with that.
So we don't, Kathy, and that's going to come up during rulemaking as well and be a policy decision point for the board too, because I would like to have an overarching rule about that, but bring the board a policy which could be revisited more regularly instead of going through the rulemaking process, but be able to take care of that as well, so that that can just be administrative and roll too.
Thank you.
All right. Well, appreciate it. This is a developing process. The core cycle isn't that old yet, so we'll just continue making it better.
And it's been really great. And Sisters has been a very great airport to work with, and the work that they've done in the past has been very good. It's just an unfortunate administrative piece of events that had happened. So we look forward to working with them in the future because we know that they'll have great projects.
Okay. So anything else from any other board member? All right, Heather, great work. Thanks for the updates and keep chugging along.
Thank you very much. And even though it's April Fool's Day, April 1st, it is the FAA's deadline for grant applications. So there you go.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. All right, going out to the board in general, just looking at any board member got an update from anything that's going on within their particular region or anything that's just you want to bring of interest to the board in general. Okay, with that then, Betty did talk a little bit in her update about, reopening, and of course she's getting the ODA staff and kind of looking out there long term. That means for us, when do we want to get back into possibly looking at a live board meeting And also there's a lot of places, we schedule each board meeting to happen within a particular town so we can, continually be out in the larger Oregon area. We haven't done that for a year now. So we need to think about where we want to go. And we also have the board's strategic annual meeting that needs to happen. Generally, that's October. And so I would like to get your thoughts on maybe proposing that October be our first in-person session. And then I need to get some thoughts. Kristen, I know that we've got to put forward our KPMs. And one of those KPMs that you got to put forward, I think starting in September, is that the board has done annual feedback with the director. I really would like to do feedback in person. And so can we say that we're doing the annual review, but we're just going to wait until October and still go ahead and submit the KPM in September?
Yes, we could do that. So the report is due in October. So one of the questions in the report is if the executive director's performance review is current. So if we are all in agreement that it will be current as soon as it's done, then you could still vote yes on that.
Okay.
And we could submit it. So yeah, I think that we could work with that.
Okay. So then probably if the board agrees, I can send out a copy of what we provided last time. That way everybody knows what we performance feedback we gave at the beginning of I'm going to have to go back and look. At the beginning of 2020 or the end of 2019, I have to take a look. And then we'll just have to know that we need to update that at some time later this year when we can all get together. And I'll provide you the process for doing that. Any thoughts about kind of using August or October as a target?
So the draft revised schedule, I appreciate it very much. The first week of August has always been a challenge for me. I'm typically in Montana. So being able to do that remotely is great. And so that October timeline to get together, I'm all in favor of.
Yeah, that's fallen in line with what we're thinking about. We're looking at more like a Labor Day is when I expect most of us will be back on site on a consistent basis. We're in the transition more as people get vaccinated, and sort of we're in flux with that right now in terms of returning to the office. But our expectation is you get through the summer, families, kids, all that kind of stuff to deal with when school gets back in. So I think October is the right call.
Okay.
I would like to start tomorrow to get together, but I'm fine with October because I don't like this at all. So
super. And then I was going to let the staff kind of draw up some suggestions on where we meet. We've had 4 locations that we've coordinated with to go to that we haven't been to. I know that Ted Millar asked us about Aurora, so there's some areas we haven't hit, and I do think we need to start skipping around the state again, just so they remember who we are. Anybody got anything in particular, or are you just willing to leave it up to the staff to make some suggestions?
Well, it'd be nice to go to an airport we haven't been to before.
Okay, an airport we haven't been to before.
I like the idea of having the staff do that. And then once we've kind of got a general consensus, Kathy, if you could send out the meeting reservations for Outlook, that'd be great.
And I will change the August one. I think right now it's talking about being on site, but I'll switch that back to virtual to comply with the timeline we're getting from the state.
All right. And then I guess if you guys can, just start in October and give us an October to October 22, where do we want to go meet at?
And then, Madam Chair, were there any things that the board would like us to be bringing to our next meeting, which is scheduled for June 3rd, and it will be virtual?
Okay. We can talk about locking in an agenda, a location. And back through my head. I think we've got everything, outstanding board inputs. You guys touched on that stuff already today. Any thoughts out there from board members on items that they would like to hear about or items that we've forgotten about?
I was wondering if you guys wanted an update on what was going on with the education career training program and the partnerships in progress with the Oregon Department of Education. I'm not the only person. As a matter of fact, I believe that there's someone else. Well, the leadership has changed, but the membership is still the same.
Okay. And Hilda, are we still pursuing some kind of state-approved curriculum, aviation curriculum for high schools, or has that discussion kind of gone to ground?
No, that is in full steam ahead right now. The next step is to see what happens with the outcomes with talking to industry as well as talking to higher education. So yeah, no, it's still full steam ahead, and we're right now in the process of the leadership I would say Hillsborough is leading this because they already have CTE. They have like 21 different career pathways there, and they already have the partnership with the community college. And so what we're trying to do is recreate the model rather than reinvent the wheel. This is a 30-second version of a very long description, but no, it's moving forward.
Okay, super. So maybe if not at the next board meeting, maybe the one after, it would be nice to get back and with the discussion of what can the Oregon Department Aviation Board, what can we do to help? Because we've been looking at trying to get education as a state-sponsored, curriculum-approved activity within our high schools, and we continue to ask, what can we do? And if we just stay out of the way, we're more than happy to stay out of the way, but we also want to try to help.
Well, I think I'll let you know. Our job was to bring a lot of people together and kind of sort of manage the direction, and I think they figure that out on their own. But yeah, no, we can do an update. As a matter of fact, it'd be really nice because there are several of us that are in there. Well, Anthony Beach is a member of the team as well. So is Heather.
So would this be at the August board meeting, you think? Kathy, would that be, does that, if I got the next board meeting, but the board meeting after, is that August?
It is. It's August 5th, and I can put it on our planning notes. And as we get a little bit closer, Hilda, if you want to get me information that you'd like to share with the board or have a presenter, that would be great to be able to plan into the agenda.
Yeah, I'll touch base with Anthony and Heather so that all three of us are in the thinking. I mean, we are all copied in all the emails and communications and invited to participate to all their virtual meetings. So we can come up with a very short update.
Okay. Appreciate that. Anything else?
Chair Meeker, the only other thing that just, and this could be 5 minutes from probably Heather, is just where we're at with the test ranges. Just a quick update.
Yeah.
Next meeting or the following meeting.
You bet. I would like to throw out there for the board, I would like to do another update regarding tall structures and our issues that we've been having with the FAA in regard to wind projects, especially, and some communications, and how we're definitely reframing our own outreach to the Pilots Association so that they understand some of these projects that are happening, because the FAA is making some decisions that we think needs more outreach. And so we'd like to bring that to the board for a bigger discussion.
Very topical, because we're going to see more wind farms.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? What do you have, Kathy? What do you show on your schedule that's outstanding?
We really covered a lot of ground today, so I think in June we'll update you where we're at with the core grants, how the 21 cycle's progressing, because by that time we should know how far down the priority 3s we were able to get.
Okay.
And so I think that will be interesting to bring to the board. The other piece, at that point, the legislature will be nearing its conclusion, whatever that conclusion is. So that's going to be helpful to know how that's going to impact our core and SOAR programs. On the on the disparity study, that will be just done and in the bag. And that's about all I can think of right now.
Okay, super. So you guys are going to get us some common language, and maybe we can talk with Becky over there at OPA. And John, who's the OWAMA chair?
It is Larry Graves, and
Oh,
then Jerry,
really?
and then Jerry Brienza is right next to him. So Larry's retiring in June, I think. So.
Okay, so if we could reach out and just as a community come together and at least do a letter, or perhaps drive to Salem and knock on, some doors. Let's do something quickly. The sunset bill has got to pass. Everybody in the you guys have done a great job tying every aviation group in the state to come behind to support this.
Yeah, I was talking to JL Wilson not too long ago, and he mentioned that it's got to get done. So
yeah. So if we need to make a trip to Salem, I'm there. Let's route stuff to support. Get on the horses. Get the lances going. Let's go tilt some windmills.
The problem is you can't even get into the building.
Stand outside with a sign.
Yeah. Right.
All right. So anyway, Betty, I'll leave that in your very capable hands. So
Martha, I'd just like to reoffer that concept of bringing the board to the Aurora Airport. And for the ones of you that are on the other side of the mountain or kind of out of driving range, we'd be happy to send a couple airplanes and pick the board up.
Now that's service right there.
I think it's important enough that we're willing to offer that.
Okay. And we could do a special session, or we could attend one of the PAM meetings. I think the staff probably has some ideas that they can come up with.
Yeah. We have those meetings on the 4th Thursday of every month. So we're happy to pick the board up for that. Or if you just want to have your own special tour of the airport, we're happy to do that too, or a board meeting.
All right. We will probably take you up on that.
Yeah, okay.
All right. And Ted, did I hear you're kind of retiring? Did you sell that piece of property over there, the old church property?
I don't know. I flunked retirement 3 times, so I'm not.
All right. All right. So the answer is no. You're going to stay with this forever. All right. Cool. Okay. So out there in board land, any reattacks on the staff? With that, then, let me go ahead and close this April session of the Oregon Aviation Board. We are dismissed.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.